Give me a moment to check the live stream. Looks good. Sergeants, can you start your recordings, please? Computer recording started.
All recording rolling.
Sergeant Hope, the opening.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to today's New York City Remote Council hearing on immigration. At this time, will all panelists please turn on your videos? Thank you. To minimize disruption, please place all electronic devices to vibrate or silent mode. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. I repeat, testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chairman Chaka, we're ready to begin.
Thank you, and buenos dias, everyone. My name is Carlos Menchaca, and I am the chair of the Committee on Immigration. We are really, we are filled with a lot of emotion here in the City Council with this committee. This is our last hearing, and we've been joined by Councilmember Chin, and I will call on others as they come and participate in this last immigration hearing. Today's committee will be conducting oversight on supporting low-wage immigrant workers in a COVID-19 recovery. And as I mentioned, it's bittersweet because we have had the honor and privilege of really supporting some of our most vulnerable and most dynamic New Yorkers in our city. Over the last 8 years, it has been an honor to serve as the chair of this committee. We have discussed critical issues and passed important legislation and have had incredible budget victories that impact over 3 million New Yorkers who migrated here and who call this great city their home. This is a city of immigrants, but their struggles and their voices are often ignored by our government. They are villainized and scapegoated at worst, and at best, they are misunderstood or just simply invisible. My goal as chair was to create a space for all of these voices, to empower them no matter what language that they spoke at home, so that they could reshape government with their own vision. The 3 million New Yorkers who are our neighbors, small business owners, teachers, taxi drivers, healthcare workers, street vendors, deliveristas, nannies, delivery workers, all government workers that are immigrants in our city right now, day laborers, organizers, our friends, and our families. These are the folks who got us through one of our most toughest times in the city. They were, in fact, essential in the survival of our great city. Over the years, this committee has discussed disparities faced by immigrant New Yorkers, including poverty, disparity in accessing healthcare and insurance, lack of adequate mental health, overcrowded living arrangements, and more. These were the disparities that caused COVID-19 pandemic to wreak havoc in disproportionate ways on immigrants. Meanwhile, New Yorkers relied disproportionately on immigrants to get them through COVID-19, as immigrants were overrepresented in industries that employed essential workers. In fact, nationwide, immigrant workers were overrepresented in some of the industries that were vital to COVID-19 pandemic response, working at high rates in occupations within healthcare, manufacturing, and agricultural fields, and keeping essential businesses like groceries, last mile delivery, the deliveristas, and pharmacies open amidst the crisis. Immigrants were also overrepresented in some of the industries that saw huge declines in demand due to efforts to slow the spread of the pandemic. For example, many industries hard hit by social distancing requirements, such as accommodation and food services, construction work, and domestic work, rely very heavily on immigrant workers, including undocumented immigrants. Since the height of the pandemic, low-wage immigrant workers have suffered significant losses of employment income, further pushing them into poverty, threatening their foundation of family economic insecurity, and placing them at risk for loss of housing and increase in toxic stress. This impact was felt most acutely by our undocumented workers who have always been denied access to the enhanced federal social safety net that has kept hundreds of thousands of other New Yorkers from experiencing poverty during the pandemic. And for the resources that they were eligible for, many immigrants disenrolled for fear of public charge. Ultimately, COVID-19 crisis confirmed that immigrants are truly the backbone of our city. It is also revealed that we're not doing enough to support our immigrant workers. And as we close this session in the City Council, I thought it was apt to look forward into the future, to discuss how the city envisions a recovery in which we uplift our low-wage immigrant workers and share lessons learned and ideas for the new City Council. As New York City transitions out of the pandemic, there are many urgent items so that we can restore employment and continue to strengthen the social bonds and the supports that our low-income workers, our immigrant low-wage workers can ultimately thrive. And we've done that to protect many immigrants by ensuring that they have everything that they need as they battle federal government that has yet to reform the immigration system. We have built an incredible safety net through Knife Up, the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project, which has created the first public defender program of its kind, ensuring everyone has a lawyer if they're in a deportation proceeding. Adult literacy, to ensure that we have baselined it at the level that we have, is an incredible victory to ensure that people have language access to learn English in their communities. Unaccompanied minors, a program that ensured that every minor had a lawyer. Immigrant Bail Fund, the Worker Cooperative Initiative, the Day Labor Initiative, Immigrant Health Initiative, Key to the City, and we've changed it this year to ensure that we are focusing on newly arrived immigrants, especially those that are speaking indigenous languages. These are just some of the things that this City Council pushed, fought for, and have won to ensure that our families are secure and safe in this sanctuary city. Now, when you testify today, I hope that I can also hear some ideas that we can leave to the City Council to ensure that our next City Council is fighting for you. I want to thank the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing from the administration about what they are doing, how they are thinking about COVID-19 as it pertains to low-wage immigrant workers. I want to thank our staff, our incredible staff, our committee counsel, Harbania Uja, as well as my Chief of Staff, Lorena Lucero, and Deputy Chief of Staff, Cesar Vargas. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it over to our council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we've also been joined by Council Members Brooke Powers and Councilmember Eugene. Thank you. My name is Harbania Ahuja, and I'm counsel to the Committee on Immigration at the New York City Council. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, when you will be unmuted by the host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called, and I will be periodically announcing who the next panelist will be. For everyone testifying today, please note that there may be a few seconds of delay before you are unmuted, and we thank you in advance for your patience. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. At today's hearing, the first panel will consist of members of the public, followed by representatives from the administration, followed by council member questions, and then additional members of the public will testify. I'd like to remind everyone that unlike our typical council hearings, we will be calling on individuals one by one to testify, and each panelist will be given 3 minutes to speak. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant at Arms will give you the go-ahead to begin upon setting the timer. Please wait for the Sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you after that panelist has completed their testimony. Today we have Spanish and Mandarin interpretation available at today's hearing for anyone who would like to testify in Spanish or Mandarin, and we thank our interpreters, Guillermo and Roddy, for their interpretation today. We will begin now and hear testimony from our first panel. I'd like to welcome Jesus Benavides to testify. After Jesus, I will be calling on Sonia Perez and then Francisco to testify. I'd like to now welcome Jesus Benavides to testify. Guillermo will be providing Spanish interpretation. Jesus, you may begin your testimony when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Okay, you listen good?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear.
Okay. Hola a todos. Mi nombre es Jesús Benavides.
My name is Jesus Benavides.
Formo parte de la colmena.
I form part of this group.
Hoy es un día muy importante para los jornaleros
Today is a very important day for us
de Staten Island porque es la última audiencia
from Staten Island because today is the last audience
aquí con el concejal de este año para los trabajadores.
here with the council for the workers this year.
Este año ha sido un año muy inseguro porque
This
este
has been a
año
very insecure year.
parece que todas las personas que nos llamaban héroes
We think that all the people that were called heroes
ahora se olvidan de la labor que hicimos durante la pandemia.
now they have forgotten all the work that we did during the pandemic.
Pero gracias a organizaciones como la Colmena que se encuentran aquí en Staten Island,
Thanks to organizations like the Colmena that are here in Staten Island,
como conocido como el condado olvidado,
known as the Forgotten County,
la Colmena nos ayudó a poder seguir adelante
La Colmena helped us to continue going forward
con los entrenamientos que dan como la ayuda de asistencia,
with the training they gave, like assistance,
con comida, pero al mismo tiempo
with food,
Enseñar.
and at the same time,
enseñarnos cómo luchar por nuestros derechos
they showed us how to continue with our rights.
y por eso es muy importante que este año
And that's why it's very important that this year
que viene sigamos con el mismo apoyo que recibimos
that comes, we continue with the same support.
Este año por parte de los concejales, porque solo así podemos sacar a nuestra comunidad inmigrante hacia adelante.
Only by doing this will we be able to get our community going forward.
Y para terminar, los dejo con mi poema que hice en el taller
And
de
to finish, I
liderazgo.
will leave you with this poem that I wrote.
Nos conocimos el día que estaba en línea en Costco.
¿Puedes repetir lo último?
Nos conocimos el día que estaba en línea en Costco
We met each other the day I was in line at Costco
cuando apenas había salido de trabajar
when I had just left work
y estaba con mi ropa de trabajo
and I was wearing my work clothes,
y la persona atrás de mí
and the person behind me
me seguía empujando con su carro
kept pushing me with his cart.
y aquí estamos cuando voy a trabajar
And here we are when I was going to work,
y el empleador nada más me grita a mí
and the employer only screams at me
y no a los americanos blancos
and not the white Americans.
tú te llamas discriminación
You are called discrimination
porque por tu culpa me han gritado y empujado.
because of you. I've been screamed at. I've been scolded
Solo por mi apariencia y por hablar español.
only because of my appearance and the reason that I speak and for speaking Spanish.
Yo a ti te conozco bien
I know you very well
porque sé lo que eres
because I know what you are
por los entrenamientos que he recibido
because of the training that I have received
para combatir el odio y discriminación.
to fight this hate and discrimination.
Por eso, aunque trates,
Because of this, even if you try,
no puedes porque yo sé cómo luchar
you can because I know how to battle you
y pelear por mis derechos.
and fight for my rights.
Por eso me conocen como Chuy,
That's why they know me as Chuy,
el DJ, porque yo traigo la música a cada protesta. Gracias.
Chuy the DJ, because I bring music to every protest. Thank you.
Gracias, Joey, por la poesía.
Gracias. Me voy a desconectar.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Sonia Perez to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Gracias por tu tiempo. Mi nombre es Sonia Pérez. Soy un vendedor ambulante y pertenezco al proyecto de vendedores ambulantes.
I belong to the people. Señora, si toma frases, yo le puedo traducir, si fuera tan amable.
Perdón.
No hay problema. My name is Sonia and I belong to the people that sell in the streets.
Sí, ahora estoy aquí. Lo más importante
And now that I'm here,
Estamos-
the most important,
para que todos nos integren al apoyo
so that everyone integrates us to the support
a la ley del Senado
for the law of the Senate,
1175
1175,
que legalizaría y descriminalizaría a todos los trabajadores de la venta ambulante.
This will discriminate for all the workers, street vendors.
Que somos inmigrantes y
We are,
minorías
we are immigrants, minorities,
como mujeres,
like women,
madres solteras
single mothers,
y de la raza negra o brown.
from the black race or brown race.
Somos emprendedoras
We are entrepreneurs
de nuestro propio negocio,
of our own businesses,
pequeños negocios,
small businesses,
y se niegan a reconocer como tal.
and they deny to recognize us as those, as such.
Hemos sido simplemente siempre
We-
de la economía de la gran ciudad.
We have been always part of the economy of the great city.
Esto quiere decir que pagamos taxes.
This means that we pay taxes.
El año pasado, los
Last
restaurantes
year,
abrieron calles para su negocio.
the restaurants open up the streets for their businesses.
Esta ley nos ha afectado a toda la comunidad vendedora.
This law has affected all of us street vendors.
Que quedó excluida de los espacios públicos y de los planes
We were excluded from the public spaces and the plans
en la recuperación de la misma.
and rejuvenizing the same.
Y otros hemos sido dejados fuera de todo alivio económico.
We have been left out of all economic aid.
Somos inmigrantes
We are immigrants
y necesitamos ser incluidos
and we need to be included
en la recuperación de la ciudad.
in the rebirth of our city.
Y que todos los puntos de la venta sean protegidos por las reglas de la ciudad
And that all street vendors are protected by the city
para no ser el blanco de acoso de las autoridades.
so we are not the target of being accosted by the authorities,
Específicamente de la policía.
specifically by the police.
Solamente le estoy dando un poquito de todo lo que hemos pasado como vendedores
I'm only giving you a little bit of everything that we have gone through as street vendors.
y quisiera que este apoyo sea más fuerte para nosotros como inmigrantes.
And I wish that this support would be stronger for us as immigrants.
Gracias por escuchar mi historia.
Thank you for listening to my story.
Muchas gracias, Sonia.
Thank you, Sonia, for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Francisco to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Ya puede, sí. Buenos días, mi nombre es Juan Mendoza.
Good morning, my name is Juan Mendoza.
Soy trabajador inmigrante.
I'm an immigrant worker.
Trabajo en construcción desde hace 10 años. Soy jornalero.
I've been working in construction for 10 years.
Mi experiencia como trabajador inmigrante de construcción ha sido difícil, especialmente
My
durante la
experience
pandemia.
as a construction worker has been very hard,
Ya que no puedo ser parte de un sindicato, tengo menos protección en el sitio de trabajo.
as I am not part of a syndicate. I have less protection and less work.
Hace unos años he sufrido de robo de salario.
For a few years, I've been suffering from salary stealing.
Trabajé en una compañía de construcción. A principio
I
nos
work for-
pagaban
I work for a construction company.
al principio nos pagaban normalmente.
In the beginning, they would pay us normally.
Después nos decían que esperáramos para la siguiente semana.
Then they would tell us to wait till next week.
Y la siguiente semana nos daban menos de la mitad trabajada.
And the following week, they would only give us less than half of the earned wages.
Esto era algo que sí los lugares.
¿Puede repetir lo último que dijo, caballero?
Sí, esto es algo que no terminaba y me robaron un promedio de $800.
This was an ongoing situation. They stole over $800 from me.
Eso estaba pasando con mucha gente.
This was happening to a lot of people.
Eso me hizo sentir indefenso ante esta situación que yo no tenía documentos.
This made me feel defenseless in this situation that I had no papers.
Tampoco un sindicato que me defendiera de estos abusos.
I didn't have a syndicate that would defend me against these abuses.
El robo de salario me afectó en mi vida porque ya no pude pagar renta.
This wage stealing affected my life because I couldn't pay my rent,
Comprar comida, comprar medicina.
I couldn't buy food. I
etcétera.
couldn't buy medicine.
El robo de salario no solamente me ha pasado a mí,
This wages stealing has not only happened just to me,
sino a muchos de mis compañeros que también son trabajadores inmigrantes de la construcción.
it has happened to a lot of my coworkers who are also construction workers.
También en los sitios de trabajo vemos muchas violaciones de seguridad.
Also, we see a lot of violations of security on our jobs.
Por ejemplo, herramientas dañadas que nos obligan a usar.
Va a tener que repetir, caballero, que no se le oyó.
Por ejemplo, herramientas dañadas que nos obligan a usar.
Oh, for example, there's tools that are damaged and they force us to use them.
En un lugar de trabajo, un compañero tuvo que trabajar sin herramientas adecuadas.
And a lot of the places we have to work without proper tools.
Y para poder cumplir el trabajo, se tuvo que improvisar para finalizar.
And to get the job completed, you have to improvise to get the job done.
El compañero se lesionó una mano y no pudo trabajar por 2 meses.
My coworker fractured his, suffered a hand injury and he couldn't work for two months.
El empleador lo llevó al hospital y como el trabajador no hablaba inglés,
The worker, the employer took him to the hospital, and because the worker didn't speak English,
el empleador dijo que el trabajador se lastimó jugando básquetbol.
the employer told the hospital that the worker had hurt himself playing basketball.
Nosotros vemos todos los días que los trabajadores inmigrantes sin sindicato
We see every day that the workers without a syndicate who work construction
son los que experimentan más accidentes en el trabajo.
are the ones that suffer the most accidents at work.
Gracias a NICE tengo mi OSHA, pero hay gente que no la tiene.
Puede repetir que you're breaking
Okay.
up.
Gracias a NICE tengo mi OSHA, pero hay mucha gente que no la tiene.
Thanks to NICE, I have my OSHA, but there's a lot of workers who don't have it.
O tiene tarjetas falsas porque una escuela o un empleador les engañó.
Or they have falsified papers because a school or an employer lied to them.
Durante la pandemia, los robos de salario y los
Time
accidentes de
expired.
trabajo han aumentado.
During the pandemic, the wage stealing has has risen.
Mucha gente tuvo la necesidad de regresar a trabajar
A lot of people had the necessity to go back to work
ya que perdió su trabajo en la pandemia.
because they lost their job during the pandemic.
Los empleadores tomaron ventaja de esa necesidad y dejaron de pagar salarios.
The employers took advantage of this necessity and they stopped paying salaries.
Dejaron de preocuparse por las condiciones de seguridad.
They stopped worrying about the safety conditions of work.
Por eso necesitamos organizaciones como NICE
That's why we need organizations like NICE
para ayudarnos y seguir
to help us and continue
formando a la comunidad sobre sus derechos. En toda la pandemia, NICE ha estado atendiendo muchos casos de robo de salario.
during the whole pandemic time. We have been experiencing wage stealing.
Pero estamos recibiendo nuevos casos todos los días y no siempre tenemos la capacidad de resolverlos.
Every day we're getting new cases and we don't have the capacity to resolve them.
Por eso necesitamos más recursos para expandir el programa de robo de salarios.
That's why we need to expand the resources of salaries.
También NICE ha estado entrenando a miles de personas en OSHA, SST y más.
We have been training a lot of people in OSHA, SST, and more.
Pero la demanda es mucho más alta
But the demand is much higher.
y tenemos una lista de espera de miles de personas más.
And we have a waiting list that's over 1,000 people.
Necesitamos recursos.
We need resources.
El centro de trabajo NICE se ha mantenido abierto en toda la pandemia.
Our center at NICE has been open during the whole pandemic,
proporcionando un lugar seguro para los jornaleros y los inmigrantes para buscar un trabajo.
providing a safe haven for all the workers and immigrants.
También hemos podido ver comida y despensas para muchas personas que las necesitan.
We have also provided food and groceries for the people that need them.
Yo he sido voluntario en este programa, además a través de nuestros de miembros NICE.
I've been part of the volunteers of this group, NICE.
Tienen acceso a referidos a servicios sociales y legales.
My apology, he's breaking up.
Tienen acceso a referidos a servicios sociales y legales dignificantes en su idioma.
They have access to services in their own languages.
Es sumamente importante que los centros de trabajo sigan operando.
It is very important that the work centers continue working.
Y expandiendo mientras muchos jornaleros como yo
during this time where workers like me
tratamos de recuperarnos de esta pandemia.
Are trying to recuperate from this pandemic.
Trabajando en condiciones riesgosas y seguras. Trabajando en condiciones riesgosas e inseguras.
Working in risk conditions and insecure.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now turn it to Councilmember, I'd like to turn it back to Chairman Chaka for any questions or comments.
Thank you. We've been joined by Councilmember Moya, and lo que quiero decir en este momento es muchas gracias a Sonia y Chuy y a Juan por tener el tiempo ahora para hablar con nosotros en esta audiencia. Es algo muy importante que nosotros escuchamos en su voz el testimonio de lo que está pasando con ustedes como trabajadores durante la pandemia. Y ya sé que si están aquí, no están trabajando. Y eso es un sacrificio. Y eso les quiero dar muchas gracias porque necesitamos oír directamente qué está pasando para crear leyes nuevas o proyectos nuevos. I just want to say thank you to those who testified. It's important that we hear directly from them in their language, in their voice, what has been happening. And so I want to say thank you to the interpreter and everybody who testified this morning. We're going to move over to the administration. And before that, I just want to say that it has been the tradition of this committee that we hear directly from people impacted by the conversation that we're having. And that's just been a thing that I have fought for every single time. And almost every hearing, we've had people from the community come and speak in their language. And our system is getting better, and I hope we can continue to evolve especially in this technology moment that we're in, to ensure that the voices really begin this conversation. And as I hand it over to our commissioner, Raquel Batista, I want to make sure our let's see, is there any other council members that have joined us?
No, none at this time.
Okay, great. I want to hand it over to Commissioner Batista. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now going to be calling on members of the administration to testify. Testimony will be provided by Moya Commissioner Raquel Batista. Additionally, the following representatives will be available for answering questions: Sarah Martin, Policy Advisor at Moya, and Nick Gulata, Director of Outreach and Organizing at Moya. As a reminder, during the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question of the administration or of a specific panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you in the order in which you've raised your hands. Before we begin, I will be administering the oath. Commissioner Batista, Sarah Martin, Nick Gulata, I will call on you each individually for a response. Please raise your right hands. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Batista?
I do.
Thank you. Sarah Martin?
I do.
Thank you. And Nick Gulata?
I do.
Thank you. Commissioner, you may begin your testimony when you are ready.
And
Thank you.
Commissioner, if I could, I'm sorry, I'm breaking protocol here, but I was looking for someone a little bit earlier, Antonio Solis, and I didn't see him. There you are. Okay, I didn't see him on the list or and he's a delivery worker who wants to tell a story. Is it okay if I interrupt you in this minute to give the delivery worker an opportunity to give his testimony?
It is fine.
Okay, I apologize for that.
No worries.
Antonio. Antonio. ¿Nos puedes oír?
Oh, ¿sí me escuchan?
Sí, te escuchamos.
Oh, pensé que se habían olvidado de mí, oye, como.
No,
así?
no, no te vi.
Ya iba a
Tienes
llorar.
unos minutos para hablar sobre
Ok,
tu testimonio.
perfecto. Ok. Buenos días, es un placer estar este día con todos ustedes.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Mi nombre es Antonio Martínez Solís.
My name is Antonio Martinez Solis.
Soy originario de Veracruz, México, y actualmente vivo en Queens.
I come from Veracruz, Mexico, and I currently live in Queens, New York.
Estoy aquí en representación de mis compañeros que lideramos los Deliveristas Unidos.
I'm here representing all my coworkers that we deliver food.
Y como parte del proyecto de justicia laboral, la organización del cual soy miembro.
I'm part of the organization, and I didn't get the name. ¿Puede repetir el nombre de la organización, por favor?
Proyecto de justicia laboral.
Project of Labor Justice.
Worker Justice Project in English, Guillermo.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, la organización de la cual soy miembro.
This is the organization which I'm a member of.
Durante la pandemia, yo y miles de mis compañeros nos transformamos
During the pandemic, me and 1,000 of our co-workers, we transformed
en trabajadores esenciales con nuestras bicicletas y motos eléctricas
in essential workers with our bicycles and our motorized bicycles.
tomamos las calles para repartir comida,
We took the streets to deliver food,
medicinas y otros productos esenciales.
medicines, and other essential products.
Somos más de 65,000 delibristas que empezamos a hacer el reparto
We are over 65,000 delivery workers who began delivering
de comida en aplicaciones
food and applications
porque perdimos nuestros trabajos en los restaurantes
because we lost our work, our jobs at restaurants
por la falta de empleo.
because of lack of work.
Optamos por empezar a trabajar con las aplicaciones
We opted to begin working with the apps
y en una industria que cada día es más peligrosa
in an industry that every day grows riskier and riskier
y sin ninguna protecciones.
without protections.
Más de 19 compañeros deliberistas han perdido la vida haciendo
Over
este
19
trabajo.
Over 19 co-workers have lost their lives doing working hours.
Hoy precisamente perdimos a uno de nuestros compañeros, Salvador Navarrete Flores, quien murió esta madrugada, desafortunadamente.
Unfortunately, one of our co-workers died this morning.
Nosotros los deliberistas nos arriesgamos la vida en las calles.
We risk our lives doing deliveries out in the streets,
enfrentando los robos, asaltos, atropellos de carros y muchas más injusticias.
facing being held up, being ran over by vehicles, and other injustices.
Cansados de ser trabajadores esenciales sin protecciones, nos organizamos como los deliberistas unidos.
Being tired of not being protected, we organize for the protection.
Para hacer que esta ciudad nos escuche y nos den las protecciones esenciales,
So that this city would listen to us and give us the protections, the essential protections that we need.
más de 4,000 repartidores tomamos las calles
Over 4,000 delivery workers took the streets
para ganar acceso al baño, una mejor paga,
to gain access to the bathroom, a better pay,
más transparencia con las propinas y el poder de tomar más control,
more transparency in the tips, and the access to more control
sobre nuestras condiciones de trabajo.
over our working conditions.
Nos organizamos y ganamos
We
Time
got
expired.
organized and we gained.
Ok, agradecemos mucho a Carlos Menchaca, gracias,
We
Carlos.
are very grateful to Carlos,
Carlina Rivera,
Linda.
Justin Bran Leider, que nos respaldaron todo este tiempo.
for giving us support during all this time.
Agradecemos al proyecto de justicia laboral
We are very grateful to this project
que lograron muchas cosas junto a nosotros, los compañeros deliberistas.
that gain a lot of things for us, delivery workers.
Esperamos contar con su apoyo para implementar estas leyes
We are hoping to continue getting your support to implement this laws
para mejorar nuestras condiciones laborales.
to better our conditions during working hours.
Este es un gran logro para todos nosotros
This is a great gain for all of us,
y todos poniéndole su apoyo para lograr muchas cosas más.
and all of us putting our foot forward to gain more.
Nosotros los deliveristas unidos sabemos que unidos hacemos la fuerza.
All of us delivery workers know that united we make the difference.
Invitando a los concejales a que se unan a esta lucha y a este movimiento.
We are asking the council members to join our cause.
Somos un movimiento que sin importar el color, la nacionalidad o religión,
We are a movement that doesn't care about the color, nationality, or
nos
race.
unimos porque al final del día en las calles todos somos iguales.
We all come together because at the end of the day, we're all the same out in the streets.
Y unidos tenemos poder. Y la
And
lucha
united we
sigue.
have the power.
Ok, perfecto. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much por escucharme y gracias a todos.
Gracias, Antonio, por tu testimonio y lo siento y hablamos más tarde sobre la familia.
Claro.
Ok, muchas gracias. I
Gracias,
want to
Carlos.
hand it over
Gracias.
to Commissioner Batista, Commissioner at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And I want to say thank you for coming to my district and bringing IDNYC to the deliveristas who you just heard from. You got to meet them and be a part of that energy. And I saw some of those pictures, and I'm sure that we're all going to be dedicated to their future in this city as they continue to grow and mobilize across the entire city. Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Chairman Chaka. And just briefly in Spanish, le quería dar las gracias a los panelistas que acabaron de dar su testimonio, Antonio, Sonia, Jesús, Francisco, gracias. Y nosotros tomamos notas, gracias por toda la información que compartieron. Thank you so much, Chairman Chaka, for this opportunity, and the members of the Committee on Immigration for calling this important hearing. I'd also like to recognize all of the hard work of this committee, and especially you, Chairman Chaka, for the work you've done over the last 8 years. Now outgoing council member, just wanted to congratulate you on all of the work and wishing you all the best in the future.
Thank you.
My name is Raquel Batista, and I am the Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. I am joined by 2 members of my staff, Sarah Martin and Nick Pulota, who will be available for question and answer. We have been living with COVID-19 now for almost 2 years. During this time, we have seen both disheartening and encouraging changes in the landscape. One thing I do want to highlight at the beginning of this hearing is how the availability of vaccines has been crucial in helping combat this virus. Moya has been working with our colleagues across the city to encourage uptake of vaccines, including the booster, as an important step in bringing the pandemic under control, especially as we monitor the emergence of new variants of COVID-19. This includes targeted outreach to low-income immigrant workers and other vulnerable populations. In addition, Moya continues to work with our partners within and outside of government to ensure that recovery is equitable and not limited to a privileged few. In today's testimony, I will briefly speak about the challenges that low-wage immigrant workers face because of COVID-19 and touch on the steps that Moya has taken to address these needs. Low-wage immigrant workers are particularly vulnerable. COVID-19 has not affected all members of New York City in the same way. To be blunt, the pandemic has ravaged populations that have historically been overlooked by all levels of government. In the case of immigrant workers, many of whom served as essential workers when the rest of us were working from home, this disparity is outlined in data. Our internal analysis has found that higher populations of immigrants or non-citizens in a zip code are linked to higher COVID-19 cases and death rates in that area. Immigrant workers in the city and undocumented workers in particular. Excuse me. Immigrant workers in the city, and excuse me 1 second. Immigrant workers in the city and undocumented workers in particular were disproportionately affected by the economic harms of the pandemic. Moya estimates that 60% of undocumented workers lost their jobs or were at risk of losing their job during the pandemic, compared to 36% of all workers. Immigrant workers, especially undocumented workers, face a wide variety of barriers. As our annual report highlights, about 60% of undocumented immigrants have limited English proficiency. Almost half are uninsured, and almost 30% live in poverty. While things are better for immigrant workers with some sort of status, immigrants in general face higher rates of poverty than their US citizen counterparts. These disparities were compounded by a federal failure to include undocumented immigrants in programs specifically aimed at reducing the harms of the pandemic. This is not a new issue, but it was particularly frustrating to see undocumented immigrants and mixed status families be excluded from direct stimulus payments, unemployment insurance programs, and more because of their status, despite all of the work immigrant New Yorkers were doing to keep the city running. I want to reiterate here a point that Moya and the city have made over the past few years. The current immigration system has failed immigrants and their families across the nation. As a city, we are doing what we can to help address the gaps, but we need federal reform that recognizes the contributions of our immigrant communities, reform that provides a path to permanent legal status and citizenship. Moya and the city worked to address needs. Moving back to the challenges that these communities have faced, the city recognized that these gaps required a multifaceted response. First, Moya worked to identify and implement innovative programming to help address the gaps for undocumented workers who are especially vulnerable. The areas of needs we saw as urgent needs included direct cash relief, housing help, and burial assistance. We were able to work with our partners to secure funding for the Immigrant Emergency Relief Program, which helped more than 76,000 immigrant workers, the vast majority of whom had savings of less than $400. We also secured funding to provide one-time relief grants to low-income New Yorkers responsible for funeral, burial, cremation, and expatriation costs of a loved one who passed away due to COVID-19. Finally, Moya has been working with NYCHRA's home-based program and enterprise community partners on FASTEN, funds and services for tenants experiencing needs, to provide rental assistance to support undocumented immigrants in rental arrears who are not eligible for the home-based program and the one-shot deal. Through this programming, we have been able to help alleviate the harms that came with the exclusion of these New Yorkers from federal benefits. Second, Moya has engaged in specific outreach to immigrant workers on a variety of issues. We collaborated with community-based organizations that work with immigrant workers to share information about available services and to deliver urgently needed help. As just one example, we recently partnered with Workers Justice to bring the IDNYC Mobile Comms Center to Sunset Park, as the chair just mentioned, and make appointments with workers. As another example, Moya collaborated with the Vaccine Command Center on their mobile vaccine bus program with the specific focus on reaching delivery workers, domestic workers, day laborers, restaurant workers, bodega workers, among others. This is an addition to recent investment of $2 million we helped secure for vaccine outreach by organizations who serve low-wage, undocumented immigrants and other vulnerable populations. Third, Moya advocated on behalf of immigrant workers at every level of government and worked with our governmental partners to help address the needs of these workers. As just one example, Moya worked closely with the New York State on the implementation of the Excluded Worker Fund. After the launch of the fund, Moya connected with the New York State Department of Labor to discuss document acceptance and challenges based on our learnings from IDNYC and other programs. This included us providing guidance on the use of employer and labor organization letters for proof of employment. We also worked with the Department of Labor to accept IDNYC as a form of identification, and ultimately all IDNYC cards that expired in 2020 and 2021 were considered valid for the purpose of the excluded worker application through the end of this month, December 2021. This is in addition to the federal advocacy we have conducted to support long-term solutions for immigrant workers and their families. As we continue to grapple with the ongoing pandemic and its effects on our communities, we welcome this chance with the committee about what remains to be done. Low-wage immigrant workers have done too much for the city to be forgotten at a time when they need support more than ever. Moya is excited to be able to work with the council on this issue, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, so much for your testimony. I'm now going to turn it over to questions from Chairman Chaka. Panelists from the administration, if you can please stay unmuted during this question and answer period, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Chairman Chaka, you may begin.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, for your work, and most recently for making that stop in Sunset Park. It was a really important moment for many workers who were, and we'll come back to questions around the Excluded Worker Fund, but I just want to say that it was a very meaningful moment, city coming together to ensure that people have their identification. I want to start with a question about language access. And I'm going to ask one question and then hand it over to members of the committee. There are a lot of votes that are happening today, so I want to make sure that members ask their questions as they go and vote on bills that we're going to vote on in the last stated tomorrow. This is the question. Language access has been a perennial issue in the city with residents that speak over 200 languages. And language access was especially critical when COVID-19 pandemic hit the city. And as New Yorkers needed access to critical and timely information in their own languages, and mind you, some of these languages are indigenous languages, we have discussed in previous hearings, many hearings actually, how Moya worked to adapt to ensure more timely access for New Yorkers since March of 2020. Can you share more on lessons that you've learned during COVID-19 and that the mayor's office has learned so that we can understand what the issues are and how we can ensure timely access to information as it changes? COVID-19 continues to give us new information. There's a new variant, Omicron. How are these messages getting put out into our communities, and is the city getting better from your perspective? And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about that.
All right, thank you very much for those questions. And I just want to briefly, Nick, if from my office is trying to unmute himself, if you all can help him with that, thank you very much. So to answer the first question on language access, Moya has made a concerted effort in collaboration with city agencies to improve language access, especially after the passage of Local Law 30, by working with the city to build city language access infrastructure and expand the availability of language access services. Throughout the pandemic, as in other emergencies that we've had in the city, Moya's worked in tandem with emergency management to activate the Language Access Task Force to identify language access challenges arising from the pandemic and to coordinate resources. Through this task force, which also includes the Department of Health, we ensured that there were ample language services resources, expanded the number of languages in which critical materials will be translated in up to 25 languages, and coordinated pro bono translation services. Moya has also developed a comprehensive COVID-19 immigrant resource guide that was updated throughout the toughest months of the pandemic, with information and resources available to New Yorkers.
Thank you. And I know Nick is going to speak, but it'd be great for in your testimony as organizations, I want to be able to kind of see how you've all caught that on the community ground side, to see if there has been a better and more efficient language access plan that Moya just presented. Nick?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Chairman Chaka. And before I say anything, I also just want to additionally thank Sonia, Chuy, Francisco, and Antonio for their testimony earlier as well. I think the best practice is to be directly responsive to your question. Really for us, advocating for the inclusion of additional languages with the Department of Health. The Commissioner mentioned 26 languages. Obviously, in a city of 200 languages, we could always do more. That's why beyond local law 30, beyond the 10 languages in which a lot of these documents are required to be translated into, we actually throughout the pandemic have fielded translation requests in up to 53 languages. And so, we understand the importance of getting this information out and to our partners that we contract with, also through our outreach. So for example, we'll send out social media in many of those languages that we translate content into. We'll encourage agencies to create graphics and other sort of resources that can be used by our partners on the ground in those languages. We'll make sure that they have the tools and toolkits so that then they can get the essential information out to community members who need them the most. That also, extends to a lot of our sort of capacity building efforts with agencies and encouraging them to create content for the languages of the communities that need the information that they're ultimately doing outreach in. So we've been very sort of in lockstep with the Vaccine Command Center and a lot of our outreach, especially on the ground, making sure we have interpreters where we don't have in-house capacity, making sure, for example, in the vaccine bus program, we're frequently, whatever community we go into, Moya is informing what languages are spoken in that community, ensuring that we have outreach in those languages, and ensuring that the interpreters are there as well. So wherever gaps are flagged, we do our best to be responsive to them, but we also want to make sure we're hearing any needs from our partners and trying to meet those needs.
Thank you, Nick. And I just want to say thank you for your work on the ground. I know you've been on the ground doing just not only COVID work, but ICE Watch work. And I just want to say thank you for that service. I have a follow-up before I hand it over to Councilmember Chin that really kind of speaks to two things. One is, how are you measuring everything that you've just kind of laid out in terms of social media languages that have been kind of spoken to, or languages that have been increased in terms of Department of Health translations? Are you in some ways measuring how many more people you're hitting, how many people are consuming the social media? Are there ways that you're getting feedback from all of these messages? Are people hearing them? Are people retweeting them? Like, is there a way of measuring it, or actually, question, how are you measuring that?
It's a great question. Thank you. So, and also thank you for recognizing our work. It's been a pleasure to partner with you and your team over the years. And I know, collectively we've done some incredible work on the ground, and I value that partnership truly. I think in terms of measuring impact, one thing that we always have to, and we've definitely shared with our colleagues at the Department of Health, is we really need to create an expectation that this information will be provided in language. So, translating, for example, documents into indigenous languages, into sort of languages with fewer speakers than the top 10 in New York City, doesn't automatically lead to a number of clicks on a website or retweets. But by continually doing it, we create the expectation that we will, as a city, will provide critical information in those languages. So for us, it's not just about the numbers, truly. I think wherever we hear of gaps, that's sort of the true sort of indicator of whether we're meeting our marks. So if an organization says there isn't any gap, there isn't any content in this language or not, we will definitely advocate for its inclusion. One of the things that we really focused on during the pandemic is been working closely with the health department to ensure, for example, indigenous languages. And I would say Dr. Simbo Ige's team at DOHMH has been incredible in working with Endangered Language Alliance, with Red de Pueblos Transnacionales, with other organizations to include presentations on COVID and other sort of critical information in languages like Garifuna, in Quechua, in Quechua, in Mixteco and African languages as well. So I think it's really important that we continue these collaborations with our sister agencies where we partner to get the word out and be as expansive as possible. We've definitely also heard a lot of feedback from our consulates and from the Mexican consulate in particular in terms of the importance of lifting up indigenous languages. And so we partnered at various points over the past several years, and particularly in getting the word out during the pandemic to include information in these languages. I think we have definitely more to go. There's definitely always more work to be done, but I think those learnings are really going to inform that moving forward.
Well, and the second part of that question was really looking forward. What systems have you built as the mayor's office to set in place and ensure that better language access happens immediately after a crisis hits? And I'm being very specific about immediately because we did not see an immediate reaction of translations when the first moment of pandemic. This is something that we fought for very hard, and there's a big lag time. Have you done anything to really install a system so that immediately people get information?
So yes, so we have been working with our language access task force to ensure that we do respond immediately in languages. I'll give you the example, right? Most recently with Hurricane Ida and our response to Hurricane Ida, our language task force was immediately on the ground, providing translation services in language such as Mandarin, Nepalese, and Spanish. So it is something that is a priority for us at Moya to ensure that access is available.
And I'm just trying to think of, there was an incident with a text message system that was built by the city. And if you remember, there was I think there was a mistake that happened in one of the translations. How did that happen, and have you corrected that?
Can you unmute Nick? He got muted again.
Yep. You got it.
Thank you so much. So I believe the incident that you were referring to, Chairman Chaka, was with a human translation of the Department of Health website. So there was, during the pandemic, when different sort of worker groups were being made eligible for the vaccine, there was a translation, and NICE had flagged this for us immediately, sort of saying, it was building service workers were being included, but the way it had been translated, and mind you, this was in a professional translation. It wasn't sort of a Google Translate, which is another way we've sort of really built capacity in terms of advising our sister agencies and sort of advocating for best practices internally. Beyond the requirements of local law 30, we've really tried to make the point that human translations are best. Our Moya website is human translated in I believe 13 languages right now. The Department of Health had their sort of key information on their homepage about COVID, also in human translations throughout the pandemic. And that's, that's a collaboration that I think really speaks to building infrastructure for the future as well. So it was a mistranslation, and it had been reported that day laborers potentially could be, that jornaleros would be able to get vaccinated. And so as soon as this was flagged, truly within a matter of minutes, both Sarah Martin and myself, working with Manny Castro, were able to flag this for the health department to change that right away. So that's one of the ways, just sort of constantly being in touch with our community members. It was a very technical sort of, when those rules were coming down each day from the state with very little sort of lead time in terms of eligibility. And so it was one of those things where we reacted immediately and were able to clear it up.
And last follow-up, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Councilmember Chen, is the number of languages that are in that text chain. For example, how is it only in English and Spanish? Are there other languages that are connected to that emergency information?
I'll start, and if anyone and my colleagues want to add in. So initially with the text information that the Office of Emergency Management was sort of promoting to New Yorkers, there was English and Spanish only. We've sort of transitioned and worked with them along the way and sort of informed using and promoting the Notify NYC app instead. And the Notify NYC app is in many more languages. It can be downloaded in those languages. I believe it's the top 10 languages right now. But you can receive those alerts, whether it's about flooding, whether it's about sort of vaccine eligibility and boosters, all in the language that you speak. So it's been increased, and the strategy has been really adjusted to sort of meet additional languages beyond where we started with just with English and Spanish.
Great. It'd be great if you can confirm what languages are currently in the system. If we can get that information before we head out, this will be great for a final report that we want to give out. And I would just want to say that we 100% in human interpretation, and that's something that my office has been really dedicated to. In 3 languages, we always put everything out at the same time in Chinese written, the Spanish and English languages as well. And that takes a lot of time, and it's a very high intense staff lift. And so we get it, we feel it. And so this is part of this larger conversation about what agencies are doing. And if they don't have a person, they just keep going. And it becomes it becomes a thing that no one comes back to, and this is why immigrants feel invisible, forgotten, misunderstood. And so the thing that we have been fighting for are things like the language bank, and that has yet to be something that this administration has taken on in any real way, and we have not been able to fund it through our budget negotiations. And so that creates a human level embedded in our community's infrastructure, worker cooperative style thing where humans from the neighborhood are translating for us and getting paid for it. And so I just wanted to note that. I'm done with this current question, and I'm going to pause my questions and hand it over to the members at this point. Unless there's any other comments that people want to make on the Moya side. And if not, we can hand it over to Councilmember Chin.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I'm just going to follow up on the language access question. I just, been working on trying to figure out a way to, provide more resources to Moya and also to get the agency to really look at language access as being important. I mean, one of the frustration is that oftentimes when agency put out important information, it's only in English. And then the translation comes later. And the frustration was like during COVID, like Department of Business, the grant program, first thing that came out was English. Where's the other languages? Oh, we're working on it. Excuse me, if you're working on the English one, it should be at the same time. And I know that is difficult for Moya. So recently we finally worked out, I introduced a legislation. Hopefully in the next session, it will get done for Moya to have a separate department of translation and interpretation. And that means giving you more resources, because like every agency, they just, either they don't have the capacity or they just don't think it's important. And I agree with, our chair. It's got to be human translation. Forget about Google translation. It's not the same. And it's like, translation is, it's like, they got to do it together. It cannot be an afterthought. And that's why that is really important. And I think that to give Moyer more resources and also the authority to sort of oversee these agencies that they're supposed to be doing their job. So that's really important. And the other thing that is to really utilize the resources in the community, whether it's like the free, newspaper, the language, ethnic media, to use those to get the word out. And I know that in the Chinese community, in terms of social media, this whole thing about WeChat. So how do government can get into those? We had to set up, my office has to set up an account so that we can get the correct information out there and resources out there. Because otherwise, a lot of misinformation, get included and people don't even know where to turn. So hopefully in the next administration, that language access will take a more prominent role, and hopefully the council will continue to push on that.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Chin. We absolutely agree that the goal should be for agencies to do this work and to carry forward this work and looking at ways on how we can deepen the work of Moya around language access issues. Also on the ethnic and community roundtables during COVID, Moya actually held 25 roundtables from January 1st up until the end of November. So we are continuing to hold those ethnic and community media roundtables. We're actually having one later this week, specifically on participatory budgeting and to continue working with our ethnic and community media.
I know that the mayor with his executive order has, asked agencies to designate a certain percentage for ethnic and community media. And we just want to make sure that the ethnic media are supported. So once, the city should, spend money to buy ads or so that we can support these local ethnic media, which is doing a lot of work for the city to get the information out. So that's something that I hope Moya will continue to advocate and make sure that they're taken care of.
Yes, the city is committed to ensuring that information and resources are robustly shared to immigrant communities through various forms, including our partnership and dissemination with community and ethnic media. Moya is also working with agencies to stand up the regular community, ethnic, and media roundtables to share resources and information. And also the Mayor's Office of Community and Ethnic Media, together with the Mayor's Office of Operations, have developed a comprehensive and diverse list of print and digital media outlets that is publicly available to all agencies. So working with our sister agencies to ensure that their resources are leveraged for maximum reach. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for your leadership on this committee. I have to hop off for a vote.
Yes, I know we have like
thank
7
you to
votes
all the
today.
advocates and the committee council. We have done a lot of work for our immigrant community that I'm truly proud of. And hopefully that the council will continue to do that, since the chair and I were term limited. But as private citizens, we will continue the advocacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Chen, for your leadership on this committee. There's no way that we could have done that without each other. Adult literacy, thinking about seniors, all of these pieces that have come together. And I want to say thank you for being on this committee with all your heart.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to put a finer point on Councilmember Chin's, and not just today, but Councilmember Chin has been a kind of big champion about how we immediately return information to public at the same time. And I think that what I want to say is that we're not there yet. And I think these crisis moments present these gaps, and we're just not there yet, where immigrant communities can feel not just respected, but feel part of the conversation that's happening citywide. And I think that that's something that I maybe want to ask you next is, and really with a focus on low-wage workers, because all of this is part of the system of support for low-wage workers, essential workers who are needing to go out there, but need the information to protect themselves. And that's why we're focusing on language access in this hearing. And is there something that you've set up for low-wage workers as Moya, which has connections to every agency? Is there something that you can point to that focuses on low-wage workers that focused on low-wage workers during the pandemic? Is there something you can lift up right now that's new, that is Moya directed through the city of New York?
Sure. So, on our Know Your Rights and our outreach work, we've been doing a lot of work. One, when it comes to the vaccines becoming available, Moya's outreach team filled the gap by holding 13 in-language large-scale virtual town halls in over 10 languages that include Arabic, Bengali, Cantonese, English, Haitian Creole, Mandarin, Nepali, Russian, and Spanish. We worked very closely with our community-based organizations, such as the Workers' Justice Project, NICE, La Colmena, Adikar, and others. And we also hosted a vaccine town hall in French for African communities to address vaccine hesitancy. So those are a few of the things that we've done directed to low-wage immigrant workers to ensure that they were getting access to the vaccine. And I know Nick may want to add a few other things that we've been doing here at Moya.
Absolutely. And let me just say also, Chairman Chaka, so I want to get back to you right immediately about your question about the number of languages for Notify NYC.
Please, thank you.
So the app is available currently in Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, French, Haitian Creole, Italian, Korean, Polish, Russian, Spanish, Yiddish, and Urdu. Those are the languages that it's available for, and the city pushes out sort of key emergency notifications to. And through our Know Your Rights program, as well as and this sort of, I think, begins to speak to your question as well. Through our Know Your Rights program, as well as our outreach internally, we get that message out directly to low-wage workers. One example of a program that we stood up that we worked really, in lockstep with the Vaccine Command Center to stand up, as you know, is the Vaccine Mobile Bus Program. And so from the launch to picking locations to thinking about where it would be located, we really had low-wage workers and immigrant workers in mind. We set up at day laborer stops throughout the city. We partnered with organizations like NICE, food pantries like Good Shepherd or La Jornada. POTS in the Bronx was one of our first initial ones. We had sort of, and we have to remember with the pandemic, the scarcity, of course, of the vaccine appointments. So we really tried to make sure that, our worker organizations, Damayan Migrant Workers, Drum, the Street Vendor Project, et cetera, would have access to these appointments and make sure that they were able to have their members and folks in the community that they work with be able to get vaccinated. So that's an example of a program where we wanted to, both through partnerships and just through our intentional outreach, reach low-wage immigrant workers. We did 136 days of action on the ground around the vaccine. And one of the things, we brought a lot of the learnings from those days of action. For
Nick,
example,
can I pause you there? On those 136, how were they targeted? And tell me a little bit about how you connected with communities. And was it because there was a lot of vaccine work, right? So how were you dedicated and kind of rooted in immigrant communities and maybe even specifically low-wage workers?
Absolutely. So, in working with the Vaccine Command Center, we really identified timing that would work for workers. So we, would reach out to I'll give you an example. In Jackson Heights, Diversity Plaza was one of the first sort of locations that we brought the bus to. We worked with our partners at the time. It was Damayan, it was Drum, it was NICE, and others to think about what times would work for their members. Okay, so on timing and interpretation as well. We set aside appointments for those organizations to be able to make sure that their members had access to them, that there wasn't just sort of everyone who was present. We made sure that the outreach was done ahead of time at the local day labor stops in Woodside, very close to Jackson Heights, to Diversity Plaza. So just taking it through, like, from start to finish, we're really intentional and thoughtful about making sure that our organizations who do this work and have these relationships in communities are sort of able to sort of lead and be sort of partners in that effort. In the 136 days of action, we similar sort of outreach plans at each one. We'd connect with local organizations. We'd advise on what languages would be needed on the ground. We tried to match our staffing as well to the communities and to the workers that we were working with to be able to get them vaccinated. I will say, frequently choosing locations where Honolero stand to pick up work in the morning or come home at. Picking locations where there's a plurality, there's many vendors, for example, like Corona Plaza, picking locations where we would ensure that we were really present and visible and available for those organizations to be able to take advantage of the vaccine. So those are a few examples of how we approach those challenges.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think what I want to do is maybe move over to the DOH, MH, and H&H relationship, and specifically anything that was really targeted with that agency and those agencies in mind around low-wage workers and maybe even city workers. We really kind of want to reveal how low-wage workers, the essential workers, and you heard from them today that they felt invisible and disconnected. And is there anything that you can kind of point out specifically that's not like the mobile van piece, but within the Department of Health and H&H?
Yeah, so we worked on NYC Care to make sure that we would increase the availability of health insurance and health access for low-wage workers. We actually worked together with organizations such as NICE and reached almost 4,500 people. And we connected over 364 people for appointments from August through September to be able to get the NYC Care. And currently, we are enrolled at 90,000 people who are actively enrolled in the program. So, we have been doing a lot of work on this, and I'm in particular with health and hospitals to ensure that we are increasing access to healthcare.
How are you enrolling folks in NYC Care? How's that happening? And what are the measurements? And can we get numbers as to how many happened during the pandemic? And as we're kind of trying to get out of pandemic world, how are you doing that? How many people have been enrolled overall?
I can start. So as the commissioner mentioned, there are currently 90,000 people who are actively enrolled in NYC Care. Over the past 2 calendar years, we've reached through contracted outreach with our partners, 403,000 people, and connected 16,640 people to appointments through direct outreach. I'll give you an example of one of our really stellar partners. As the commissioner mentioned, NICE has reached 4,496 people, connecting 364 people to those appointments through August 2020 to September 21, as well as through our own outreach work at Moya and a separate budget from a separate sort of bucket from our contracted outreach with organizations. At all of our sort of outreach events where we're intentional about reaching immigrant workers, We will we'll bring pamphlets and sort of information and speak to community members about NYC Care, roughly about 308 events since the pandemic began, 129 of them in person in 2020 and 179 in 2021. And so we're frequently promoting the program on our end, as well as working with our contracted partners as well to do that outreach.
And also, I'd also like to add that we had our Support for Immigrants campaign, where we worked the Support Not Fear marketing campaign, where the goal of the campaign was to educate and assure New Yorkers about health and social services that are available to them regardless of immigration status or their ability to pay, and to counter misinformation about the eligibility for public benefits. Ad placement focused on immigrant New Yorkers in neighborhoods with the highest percentages of LEP, of limited English proficient New Yorkers and immigrant New Yorkers, and also neighborhoods that were hardest hit by COVID-19 with the highest rates of infection and mortality.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I remember that coming out. And what it reminds me of now are the small businesses. So kind of moving away from the health piece, we know that so many of the impacted communities and sectors were small businesses having to close down and not always understanding how to connect to government. For the small business immigrant owners, how did Moya connect with SBS to ensure that they had everything that we were able to give them? Is there anything specific that you can talk about that Moya led in that response?
Moya did do a lot of work together with our sister agency, SBS, to ensure to get information out to small business owners in their languages on the availability of everything from grants, loans to other information that was available. And we do still continue working directly with SBS, also in participating in our community and ethnic media roundtables to help inform our small businesses about the services that are available. So we do continue to do that work.
How many people did you reach in that engagement on small business and small businesses across the city?
I'd have to, Councilmember. Oh, sorry, Commissioner, please.
No, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead.
I would say we can definitely cut the data for you to sort of meet the question after the hearing. I'd say as a distinct category, small businesses from, say, domestic workers or day laborers or other folks, we would have to really go back to our data and comb through to sort of pick out each event that was specifically just targeted to small business owners. I will say a lot of the, and so we can, I can commit to getting you that data after this hearing, just specific to small business outreach. One of the things that I would say is that we partnered frequently on town halls also with SBS in sort of plugging gaps where there were sort of language gaps in the very beginning of the PPP loan, for example.
Yeah, right.
And so we stood up multiple virtual town halls for small business owners in Spanish and in Chinese. And when other languages became available, we assisted with translations as well as helped with outreach in those languages. So there was a close connection with SBS to make sure we were, they launched just a ton of new programs throughout the pandemic, and every time they sort of needed our assistance, we were more than happy to oblige. We've partnered on many different town halls for business owners. And I'd also say, working with our partners at DCWP, we've engaged in a lot of small business outreach with them and sort of partnered. It's definitely in their wheelhouse, but we'll certainly lend a hand anytime we can and support with that outreach.
Thank you. I'm glad you're doing data collection on small businesses, locations, and geography, but also language. It'd be great to kind of see what language was requested for X, engagement. I think these are part of the things that we want to understand where the gaps are. And I think what you're hearing from some communities are that the city's only focusing on Spanish, or Spanish comes first and Urdu comes last. And so this is part of this question about gap in getting information out, especially for our small businesses that are really the backbones of so many neighborhoods across the city. So it'd be great if you can give us that information and cut it in a way that we can see what we want to see, gaps and where you have focused in the past. I'm going to move on to the next question. I know we have 3 more panels coming from the community organizations and members in the public. And I really want to move over to the relief that we did not see from the federal government in any way, but the state and the city did step up. And there have been, in fact, several relief programs to assist individuals who lost their jobs or suffered from loss of income as a result of the pandemic here in the city. And how did Moya assist low-wage workers, immigrant workers, in applying for such programs? And specifically, I'm looking in terms of how did Moya support immigrants in applying for these programs and getting ID NYC that would, for some of them, be incredibly helpful in that application process?
Thank you so much for that question. So there were several relief programs that came out of both the city and the state. One that Moya led was the COVID-19 Immigrant Emergency Relief Program, where we got cash assistance to immigrants in New York City, particularly undocumented immigrants, anyone who was not eligible for any of the federal or the state relief. We completed 3 rounds of the Immigrant Emergency Relief Program to provide cash assistance to immigrant New Yorkers. We partnered with over 35 community-based organizations who have a deep ties and strong relationship with hard-to-reach immigrant communities to disperse the emergency funding. And we also worked with 26 referral partners during the first round of that funding. In addition to the Immigrant Emergency Relief Program, we also did work specifically on the Excluded Worker Program, where, as you know, in August of 2021, the Department of Labor launched the New York State Excluded Workers Fund. Moya worked very closely with the Department of Labor in the lead up to the application launch to discuss the document acceptance, the challenges based on our learnings from ID NYC and the emergency relief program that we did and other programs. We provided guidance on the use of employer and worker and labor organization letters for proof of employment. We also worked with the Department of Labor to accept ID NYC as a form of identification to prove their identity and residency. Utilizing the city's current guidelines for expired cards, all ID NYC cards that expired in 2020 and in 2021 were considered valid for the purpose of the Excluded Worker Fund application through December 2021. So I'll just also hand it over to Sarah, who can also give further details on both programs that we worked on.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair and other council members. Also to the panelists, thank you. It's really important for us to hear your stories in your own words. So it's an honor to be here listening to you all. I helped to manage our COVID relief fund and worked on many other COVID relief programs. I want to first emphasize the importance of our CBO network of 60 providers, both funded providers and referral partners, who we started working with as early as April 2020. Not only were these community partners vital in getting over $20 million out into the community to folks who weren't at the time receiving any support, any assistance, but the network also proved really important both in our advocacy with the state and other city programs in creating additional resources for this community, and then also plugged into many of these resources. So even before we started the relief fund, they were acting as hubs providing various services for community members, but that work only continued to expand and continues to this day. So we were able to plug this network and show the success of our work and also working on other programs such as housing programs like the FASTN program through HRA and Enterprise and home-based providers to help folks in rental arrears and with other housing needs who don't typically qualify for home-based services because of their status, or the state's ERAP program, which also helped provide rental assistance to folks who are behind on their rent. So, and then of course the Excluded Workers Fund. In each of these programs, we were able to plug in the network of vital, super important providers, some of whom are here right now. And also we did our advocacy, on Excluded Workers Fund with the state. We really emphasized the importance of working with trusted community providers, the importance of that partnership between government and CBOs who have relationships with the exact folks that we're looking to help. And so yeah, sort of all of our work on these various programs happened very naturally because of our success early on in the pandemic.
Got it. Thank you. And before I move over to a kind of finer point on this, how many New Yorkers did Moya help sign up for the Excluded Worker Fund?
So in total, the Excluded Worker Fund enrolled over 350,000 people. Moya was very vital, as I mentioned, in working with the state and connecting many of our partners to the state, and they ended up being, in many cases, funded providers to help connect folks and essential and helping with the application process. As you touched on, we also helped connect folks to IDNYC. So we connected hundreds of folks to IDNYC so that they were able to obtain an ID and apply for Excluded Workers Fund. We opened certain sites at NYCC.
Sure, let me pause there really quick. I just want to get some numbers and then we can move on to the next question. Sure. But so I'm just realizing that you probably, Moya didn't actually do any application processing with members of the community. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. We worked like supported this. That
clear. And the second question is really kind of looking at, and this is partly because our office kind of transformed into a application processing center, and we had hundreds of people come through the office to apply. So we moved people through. Like many of the nonprofits, the money from the state came in so late, and there was a lag time there, and so we took that on with many of the assembly members, especially Marcela Matenas, assembly member in Sunset Park, and we both kind of became spaces for that, and my staff round the clock did that work. What we saw were a need of IDNYC for many members who came through that did not have them. How many IDNYC cards did you kind of process through the time of Excluded Worker Fund? I'd love to know that number. So essentially fall to now. How many cards how many applications did you have completed for low-wage workers?
Sure, so I can answer that question. We didn't collect that specific information, but we're happy to see how we can get back to you on the number of folks. But we did. Oh, go ahead. But we did work really closely with the funded organizations who did a great job in doing the outreach and doing the applications for the Excluded Worker Fund. So I'll give you one example. Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation was one of the funded organizations, and we actually worked with them to put an IDNYC staff there so that folks from the Bronx and from Washington Heights and other places could go there specifically to both get their IDNYC and do their application for excluded worker. And at that center, while we were there. It wasn't for a very, very long time because of space issues at the organization, but we got 200 people at that specific site for applying for excluded fund and applied for the IDNYC. So that's one example of the work that we did.
Great. That's really, really great. And is there a number that you can give me of how many cards did you process in the fall, from the fall till now? Is that number something you have?
I think that we will need to get back to you on that one.
Okay. If we could during the hearing, that would be wonderful to know. Because I think what my next question is, I sent a letter on the 22nd of November asking IDNYC to conduct an extensive review of new documents that can be used for proving identity. This is something that has been a evolving conversation, and we still haven't received an official response. So I'm asking you if you can kind of talk about that today. I still want this on paper and in response to that letter, but it'd be good to talk about it here. We have many members of the community organizations that are kind of pushing us on this. And so moving forward, how is Moya thinking about expanding the types of identification accepted so that they can meet the point threshold in applying for IDNYC?
Yes, so thank you for that question. We are still reviewing that letter. We are going through each and every one of the IDs that you and the committee has identified and making sure that we're vetting each one to see which ones we can use. I can say that we are accepting NYC Care as a point for IDNYC, and that actually started recently, like in the last 2 or 3 months, we started accepting NYC Care. So that is happening, but we will get back to you soon on that letter. It will be very soon.
Great.
And I don't know if Nick wanted to add anything to that, or Sarah.
Sure.
No, I think you covered it, Commissioner. I'd just say, we definitely, I think you had and the committee had some great ideas there, and we're definitely working to review them. And, there are real challenges, and that's why we're working to vet each document to really ensure access.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to make sure that, and I know one of you will stay for the testimony, but I think that this is another tension point with IDNYC that has kind of been lingering for a while, and the accessibility to IDNYC has diminished drastically because of COVID. And so many workers that we saw who didn't have IDNYC, we weren't able to get IDNYC to our district until just now. And so we want to say thank you for that. But there are hundreds of and potentially thousands of people in Sunset Park that still have yet to get their IDNYC. And with a pending refunding of excluded worker fund, we have so much to do to ensure that people have what they need to qualify. And that's on us. It's not on the state. The state created their thing. That's on us as a city. And so I hope you take that to heart and really move those things that are causing that. And I hope that organizations really are clear about that, because I can't be the only one speaking to that. You all need to speak to that as well. And that's important. Shifting over to the state in general, and specifically the governor's office, can you talk to us a little bit about the coordination with the governor's office? We have a new governor, and I don't know if that's changed ways of communication with Moya specifically, and specifically focused on low-wage workers. Is there anything kind of coming up on that?
So with our communications with the state, the administration is in continuous conversation with the state and with the new governor. For example, right, I'll bring up again on Hurricane Ida and the relief There was a lot of coordination happening between the city and the state in responding to get undocumented immigrants access to assistance. So they were not eligible for FEMA. And that is one example where the city put in $7 million towards the $27 million fund to assist undocumented immigrants through that particular situation. And we do continue working on a variety of issues with the state. Most recently, we've been talking to the Department of State around legal services. In particular, in this particular case, they just announced the Afghan refugee resettlement funding. They put $2 million towards that, and we had a conversation with them around coordination and monitoring the situation in that particular community. So we do continue doing that work.
On the legal services piece, the federal government has yet to give us something that we can be proud of. Very disappointed with our federal government right now, but it is still possible with the current makeup. Is Moya looking to really ramp up legal services? In so many ways, the council has been leading in thinking through very specific bodies of work, unaccompanied minors, the bail fund, knife up. These are all big conversations that we've had in the council, and the mayor kind of lags. Is there a leap in any kind of way that you're seeing where Moya is really thinking through the ramping up of providing legal services to our communities? And is that something that's on the docket? How are you thinking about this, especially as you prepare the new mayor coming in?
It absolutely is for Moya. This is definitely a priority area. We continue to monitor the situation with the federal policy and Build Back Better and the immigration provisions and how they will impact New York City and our ability to respond and to work and coordinate with our community-based organizations, with our partners, including the private bar. We are thinking about these issues, looking at, how can we help to reduce issues around like notario fraud and all of those other things that come up whenever there is a new immigration law that passes. And so Moya is having conversations internally around how do we prepare to respond.
Okay, I think that's important to hear, so we have it on the record. That's something that this is a big fight, I think, with the mayor's office, and I hope that doesn't stay a fight with this new mayor, because legal services are sometimes the most critical because they impact one of the most impactful moments in a family's interaction with the immigration system, either through deportation or through citizenship. So I want to ask this next and big question about the executive budget, which added an additional funding of $2.6 million in fiscal year 2022 for immigration-related initiatives administered by Moya, including Know Your Rights, New York City Citizenship, We Speak New York City, NYC, and Rapid Response. Funding is slightly higher in 22 due to startup costs for We Speak in the first year. So how has Moya been using this money? And can you walk us through what you've been doing in spending down that money? And have you included any material related to COVID-19 vaccine mandate in the We Speak NYC program?
Sure. So Moya oversees a number of programs and initiatives to ensure that immigrant New Yorkers are informed and can access the supports they need, including immigration services. The $2.6 million has been used to fund a variety of initiatives, including the Rapid Response Legal Collaborative, Know Your Rights, We Speak NY, and our New York City citizenship to address some of the needs of that immigrant New Yorkers face.
So I guess what I want to get a sense of is, can you go deeper into anything that We Speak New York is doing to be responsive and specific, not just to COVID-19, but to crisis moments that happen in our city, and how dynamic and responsive can that program be?
So We Speak NYC regarding the COVID-19 vaccine specific information. We have added information shared from our vaccine command center, and we do share information to our We Speak organizations and partners on issues related to COVID-19. We have not yet produced a video right now on COVID-19 information, but We Speak does include in all of their communications with our partners information highlighting our services.
Okay, Nick, I don't know if I saw you.
Sure. Yeah, sorry. I think the commissioner, just to add to what she said, so we send out daily sort of digest to all the We Speak instructors as well. And in there, we'll include a lot of the sort of key updates from the city, both as the commissioner mentioned from the Vaccine Command Center, as well as sort of policy updates from across the city. So through that communication directly with instructors, we definitely are able to keep them informed. I'll also say, and I again, I want to thank you for your partnership with We Speak over the years and funding. And one of the new episodes, Shola's Voice, does include some messaging around the vaccine and sort of immigration status not being a factor. So it's definitely, as you mentioned, it's one of the most, I would say it's one of the most dynamic programs in city government. It's certainly adapted to sort of meet a lot of the sort of challenges that we faced over COVID, from moving to virtual and exploring different partnerships with technology. That program is really doing a lot of outreach to community members, and is able to include sort of new information as well through the channels that I mentioned.
Can you, hold on. I vote yes. I'm actually voting on the other committee as well. Okay, back to this idea that it's dynamic. I just want to really give you the opportunity to talk about how dynamic it is and what you have included, if you can, in We Speak. I think part of what the one tension I had with We Speak is that it's not an adult literacy program. It's going to be an engagement program that can help people in a different way, but it's not a kind of classified academic rigor. And I think this is part of the NYCAL conversation, the New York Coalition for Adult Literacy. But it does present this amazing opportunity to create new ways for New Yorkers to engage in some of the more pressing and new dynamic issues that are hitting the city of New York, especially like a pandemic or any kind of climate change related issues, basements. There's so much information that can come out there. So if there's a way that you can give us a taste of what that is, I would appreciate that.
Sure.
I can start. Oh, please,
go ahead,
Commissioner.
No, go Nick. Go Nick.
I'd start by saying, we've faced a number of, as you mentioned, sort of both civic changes to New York City over the past several years. Ranked choice voting, for example, other sort of topics where we've included them in episodes, mentioned sort of in Shola's Voice, the latest sort of release from We Speak. We included information about both ranked choice voting, vaccine, sort of hate, and other topics to, being responsive to the time we're in. We obviously produced, and you've been a great partner in this around census as well, and just making sure we're including those things. So I would say if there's any sort of topics that you would like us to explore moving forward and thinking about new episodes or new topics, we definitely welcome that from the committee. And certainly if there's any examples of collateral or anything that you'd like to see, we can get that to you after the hearing. But we try certainly in the communication with instructors to be keep them up to date about the latest sort of news and rules from the city around the pandemic, to bring that to English language leaders and learners as well. So that's sort of the mechanism in a nutshell, but certainly we're open to exploring any recommendations you have.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. And for folks that are listening right now, how can people get connected to We Speak New York? Is there a plugin that you can give, a URL, if someone is listening right now and they want to refer to somebody or join in themselves? How do they do that?
Yeah, I would say our website is a work of art and is one that we're really proud of. So you can go to nyc.gov/learn-English, or you can go to just on Google, We Speak NYC, or by calling 311, we can connect you to available classes. I think the website is an amazing tool. And all the videos there and the content, the instructor guides and other things are also available. And, I think that team is really, if you were to compare it to other city government websites, has really worked to fine tune an engagement, for folks who are limited English proficient and English learners to be able to engage with that content. So I'm really proud of that work.
Beautiful. And we'll tweet that out so that people can engage. Well, that's it for my prepared questions. And I think what I want to do is really now give space to the organizations that have been holding a lot of what you've been speaking to. Who is going to stay here? And it'd be great if you can stay on camera so we can keep engaging you throughout the rest of the hearing to not just listen to the organizations, but also to kind of hear some what I'm going to be trying to pull out is some feedback to the administration. We want to be better. And I think feedback is the best way to do that, especially if it can help make all our systems better to engage our immigrant low-wage workers. Commissioner, who is staying on your team to listen to the rest of the panel? We have 3 more.
Well, Sarah, Nick, Martin, and Eileen are on, and they will be staying on. And so Chairman Chaka, again, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you for your 8 years of service, for doing all of this work on the Immigration Committee. Thank you to all the Immigration Committee members for all of the work that all of you have done. I look forward to continue speaking to you from now through the end of the year, and hopefully in the new year. I just want to wish you a happy holiday and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for you and your work. COVID was not easy on public service, and you stepped up and you made things happen. And on behalf of my district, I want to say thank you for everything you've done for District 38 and immigrants across the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hand it back to our committee counsel, Harbani Ahuja.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we've concluded testimony from the administration, and I'd like to thank everyone for their testimony. We'd like to now turn to public testimony. I'd like to remind everyone that we will be calling on individuals one by one to testify, and each panelist will be given 3 minutes to speak. For panelists, after I call your name, a member of our staff will unmute you, and there may be a few seconds of delay before you are unmuted, so we thank you in advance for your patience. Please wait a brief moment for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use a Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you after that panel has completed their testimony in the order in which you've raised your hands. We'd like to now welcome our first public panel. First, I'd like to welcome Manuel Castro to testify. After Manuel, I will be calling on Yesenia Mata, followed by Ligia Gualpa, followed by Karina Kaufman Gutierrez, followed by Mario Russell. Manuel Castro, you may begin your testimony when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Manuel Castro, and I'm the Executive Director of New Immigrant Community Empowerment. I first would like to thank Councilmember Carlos Menchaca for all your years as chairperson and member of this committee. Carlos, I think, you know, your friendship has meant a lot to the immigrant community, to myself, our team. And, you know, it's sad to see you go, but I know you'll continue to be a champion. And I also want to thank Lorena Lucero and Cesar Vargas from your team. I think, you know, I don't know how we would have done without their support these many years, especially through COVID. And frankly, your leadership has done a tremendous amount in uplifting issues that impact undocumented workers and families. And that is just tremendously meaningful. That's not always the case. And we always fight to center undocumented workers in the work that we do. And so we thank you for the support. You know, I appreciate the time, but I think our member Juan earlier today and the workers that testified did a great job in really speaking to the needs that they're experiencing at the moment as we try and rebuild from the COVID-19 pandemic and also continue to address the issues that keep coming up. So I'll just say, and I want to drive this point, that in the transitions that we're about to go through and are undergoing, it's really important to protect our institutions. And certainly it's important to continue to support and strengthen the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. But I would also like to say that we need to include the nonprofit organizations that the Council has supported over the many years to really strengthen and build up to be able to address the many issues that we've been confronted with, especially, you know, during the pandemic. So I want to speak to that because it's been so important to have the city's support, and it would be a shame to lose that and to lose the kind of infrastructure that we're able to sustain because of the Council's support. So as you know, not just New York City, but the state government and also foundations have relied very heavily on centers like ours to achieve the many things. And you heard from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs that we've been able to achieve as a city to mitigate the issues and address the issues that our communities have been dealing with during the pandemic.
Time expired.
And it's also important to say that these organizations and these centers are made up of people like myself and my colleagues here today that have put themselves at great risk and remain at the front lines of the pandemic. So I just want to reemphasize that it's going to be really important for the new council and the new administration to listen to us, to listen to our experiences, and continue to support us as the city has. It's unpredictable. None of us knew 2 years ago what would come, and we all, decided to, address the issues that COVID-19 brought up for our particular communities, and we don't know what's coming in the future. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope to continue to work with Councilmember Menchaca and your team in whatever you decide to do next, and with the rest of the council members here today. Thank you.
Gracias, hermano.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Yesenia Mata to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Good morning, Chairman Chaka and council members of the committee. My name is Yesenia Mata. I am the Executive Director of La Colmena, a day labor and immigrant rights organization on Staten Island. I'm going to be speaking on the issues that Staten Island immigrants workers face and why it's important to continue funding La Colmena and day laborers, the Day Labor Coalition. Staten Island immigrant workers and communities have been weathering the impacts of the COVID-19 public health and economic crisis. A range of structural socioeconomic factors contribute to the inequities behind the disproportionate negative impacts of the pandemic on people of color and immigrants in Staten Island. For working class immigrants, a key factor is a concentration in low-wage sectors of the economy and under non-standard work arrangements that largely exclude them from the legal protections that regular employees enjoy. These workers are also exposed to safety hazards in industries with high injury rates, such as construction, and lack adequate access to healthcare. The lack of former employment contracts and job security due to their immigration status left workers more vulnerable to job losses at the onset of the pandemic. But despite their economic and social vulnerabilities, they played a crucial role in sustaining the economy of Staten Island as the COVID-19 pandemic developed. They spend more than 91% of their income on housing and basic consumer goods, serving an essential source of revenue for local businesses. But let's be clear, 98% of workers did not qualify for any form of pandemic relief or unemployment benefits. The Excluded Workers Fund and the Mayor's Emergency Relief Fund provided some benefits, but more needs to be done and more funding is needed. During the pandemic, La Colmena remained open to address all of these survival needs of the families and shifted on becoming an emergency response center. These issues highlight the need for increased funding for worker centers such as La Colmena. I want to thank Chairman Menchaca and his office, Lorena and Cesar, for always being champion of immigrants. Your commitment to immigrant workers will not be forgotten. Thank you for making plenty of trips to Staten Island. As you close your time as council member, I hope, and I know they will, the new incoming class will continue your committed advocacy on behalf of our immigrant workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Hermana. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Ligia Gualpa to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Councilmember Menchaca, and the entire committee on immigration.
Leah, I'm sorry, we're having an issue with your audio.
I'm really sorry, technical issues. So my name is Alicia Hualpa.
Hola, Alicia.
I am the executive director of the Workers' Justice Project, a workers' rights organization that represents day laborers, house cleaners, domestic workers, mostly essential workers who are playing a vital and irreplaceable role in our city's recovery. COVID-19 and its economic impact has been devastating to low-wage workers, immigrant New Yorkers. WJP members and millions of other immigrant New Yorkers were uninsured, as you heard it, unemployed and excluded from all social safety net programs for more than a year. In partnership and with the support of the council members and many of the people who have been in leadership, and I'm extremely thankful to you, Carlos, and all city council members who really have partnered with us through the Day Labor Workforce Initiative, allowing us to really step it up as emergency relief centers in the middle of the worst crisis of our time. And together, we've been able to step it up where our federal government failed, providing millions of dollars in aid, indirect cash benefits, food distribution, being able to be the main source of support and the only safety net that immigrant workers have been relying on us for in order to survive the current crisis that we're living. We have come a very long way. We have built powerful infrastructures for immigrant essential workers through the Day Labor Workforce Initiative. WJP, as you heard it through other incredible sister organizations that are part of the Day Labor Coalition, have been able to step it up as emergency relief centers before COVID-19, and we're hoping to continue to get the support from the new incoming class of council members who will be able to sustain this infrastructure and really partnering with us to continue to build a safety net, but also a community and grow the collective power that all essential workers have in New York City. So thank you so much to you, Carlos. We hope that we can continue to partner with you and the new incoming class and really to continue building this infrastructure so we can continuously to provide essential services, just like the way we're doing right now. We have here, we're in the middle of a massive network support system that we're building for deliveristas and for other essential workers. So thank you to you. Thank you to every city council member that has really been with us, the Day Labor Coalition, for just being with us.
Oligio, I think we lost you. We may have.
We
Alicia, I
can't
think
hear
we
you
lost.
anymore.
We lost your audio, but muchas gracias, hermana, and thank you for tuning in and speaking your truth to power directly from WJP. Muchas gracias.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Karina Kaufman Gutierrez to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Karina Kaufman Gutierrez, and I'm the Deputy Director at the Street Vendor Project. And I first really want to thank you, Councilmember Menchaca, and also to Lorena and Cesar behind the scenes, always, ride or die for street vendors, for immigrant workers, always out in these streets with us, and really, really appreciate the way that you have championed street vendors throughout your time in council. SVP is a membership-based organization that advocates for street vendor rights and fights to improve their working conditions, which have been in crisis since long before COVID-19, right? As an organization, we have the privilege to serve and build the street vendor community, folks who come to SVP as a one-stop shop for all issues that they are facing, from housing to food insecurity to immigration support to demystifying the street vending system. Approximately 90% of street vendors are immigrants who have limited access to other forms of employment opportunities, and for whom street vending offers them a flexible schedule and also ownership as the owner of their small businesses, right? Our membership is incredibly diverse, and our members are speaking a wide variety of languages, including Arabic, Bangla, Spanish, Mandarin, Tibetan, and Wolof. And so when you spoke earlier about the rapid translation and the staff power and the time, that has been one of our main efforts throughout the COVID pandemic, is to make sure that all information is rapidly translated. So with a staff of 9, that becomes one of our most time-consuming efforts beyond all of our day-to-day work, and also, ensuring that folks are having access to legal services, providing those consultations, and also providing food. The vending community combines 2 of the hardest hit populations during the pandemic, immigrants and small businesses. Vendors serve all New Yorkers across the city and contribute to our local economy and culture, paying taxes just like any small business, as our member Sonia shared earlier. But they're excluded from almost all existing government relief programs. And folks even today, are reporting up to 90% losses in income from what they were making prior to the pandemic. Within our membership, 52% of street vendors are reporting that they've reduced their food consumption over the last 12 months. 46% said that they and other household members had skipped a meal in the last month alone, right? Our members are facing crippling depression, anxiety, and fears related to COVID-19 and their losses, their ability to just put food on the table at the end of the day. And this has only continued to get worse because vendors are experiencing fines, confiscations, and harassment from city officials for just trying to do their jobs. So imagine this, right? This is our reality, is that after 2 years of a pandemic, of street vendors being treated as being called essential workers, now when they go out to work, they're at risk of confiscation. They're unable to get the permits and licenses that they need to stabilize their businesses, and are being treated, frankly, as subhuman, as less than other New Yorkers. I just wanted to thank as well Councilmember Menchaca and your amazing team, because this year we did pass Intro 1116, right? That was a feat to reform the street vending industry from the inside out. And so I wanted to thank you for your work on that. And also just to share, for the incoming council, there are many ways we can continue to build off of the work of Councilmember Menchaca and folks for Intro 1116. So completely formalizing the street vending industry so that street vendors can receive all the necessary business licensing that they need. truly removing the NYPD from all vending enforcement in line with what has been the city policy since January 2021. But unfortunately, it continues to be the case that NYPD is continuing to go after street vendors. Reducing the barriers to successful application for grants and loans to street vendors, ensuring the timely implementation of Intro 1116, including distribution of new permits by July 2021, and continuing to create new commissary spaces through incentive, tax breaks, and streamlining of the permitting process. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Hermana. And on behalf of Councilmember Chin and I, who were the co-prime sponsors of this incredible legislation for street vendors, we say thank you for pushing us and for really informing the bill and how it needed to kind of roll out. And I know that I think it was Sonia who mentioned the state legislative process that would really kind of take care of the other piece, which is the limit that can really help our street vendors on the ground. So muchas gracias.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Mario Russell to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Committee Council, and thank you, Councilman Menchaca. And the thank you is with a capital T and a capital Y across the present moment and many years of just really extraordinary leadership and really deep thoughtfulness on your part. And I'll say this, passion. So I hope and I know that these are the gifts that you will continue to bring wherever you are. So this is not a loss. The gains continue. So thank you really for that. And thank you for the opportunity just to speak briefly today. You know, the impact of COVID-19 on communities that we serve and those of immigrants and refugees and really ultimately communities of color has been and really continues to be harsh and disproportionate and lasting. Catholic Charity's own connection to immigrants and refugees has a long history, and what we have continued to do over the past 6 years that I've served in my capacity as Director of Refugee and Immigrant Services is to broaden our support and our connection and our connectivity with legal, resettlement, detention, integration, day labor, ESL, clinical, family reunification, children, and court defense services. Our feeling and our theory is the person walks in usually with one request but many needs, and therefore also building up our information referral services with the Action NYC hotline and the state hotline and a national hotline. But needing, of course, of the past 24 months to really adjust and readjust and focus and refocus our response. The pandemic made that incredibly difficult, and it's clearly a job that's not finished, as we've really heard today. Just 24 months, you know, in the time roughly that we're rounding out 2 years, we distributed over $6 million of financial assistance and over 1 million meals. And really, we had to retool and re-engineer our legal services to be almost like a refugee camp at downtown 80 Maiden Lane. You know, people came for food and for financial assistance. So, you know, at the broadest level, I say this is where we land our call for support and our call to continuing action. There are sort of specific ways that I'd like to mention today, but very briefly. You know, the first really is continuing the commitment and expanding training and gathering space opportunities for day laborers. There's no discernible end to the pandemic in a sense, and its effects are still real and ongoing. And so developing this in particular
Time expired.
Spaces, which are work centers, they're like schools, they're like community centers, they're distribution centers, they're communication and information centers. These are hubs that have proven to be profoundly important and necessary to not only day laborers, but I would then toggle to the second point, to asylees and refugees, immigrants across the board. And I want to sort of identify kind of the workforce needs of this population of undocumented people, asylees and refugees, that really are similar to and mirror those of the of the undocumented day labor workers. Maybe they're here for less time, but likewise are in that deep zone of uncertainty, that deep zone of undocumented status. And I sort of will use sort of the Afghan experience that we have been having recently, right? Knowing that we're going to resettle 1,000 in New York. Catholic Charities already working with over 100 families in New York City. And what we see is the deep vulnerabilities of them, of the folks who've been transferred from the border, of the Haitian communities that are being transferred from the border, all of them without work permit, without work status. So what do we need? At the broadest level, the second point is actually mental health and social support services. The day will come, and I fantasize that we will have a pro bono mental health network, just like we do with legal services. 2, thinking through how to coordinate affordable and accessible housing. 3, how to navigate and negotiate with the feds around work permit delays for those who are eligible for work permits, because 2 years is a long time. And last, legal consultations and legal support. And you mentioned this earlier, Council Chair, and I think you've always been so aware of the symbiotic, synergistic relationship between legal services and everything else. A healthy legal case helps a healthy family, in a sense. So with that, I would say we would lend our call, our support, our need for attention really in these many, many complicated zones, and remain always grateful and hopeful that we'll work together on this in your private capacity or with the council as the years go by. Thank you very much.
Amen to all of that, brother. Thank you so much, Mario, for your work. And I can't begin to say thank you enough for what you've been holding on the ground. And I'll add some more things in my final remarks, but I want to say thank you for that support and for being on the ground with our immigrant community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mario, for your testimony. We've concluded testimony for this panel, so I'd like to just turn it to Chairman Chaka for any comments and questions before we move on to our next panel.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one question, and I'm really thankful again that Moya is here present, really kind of taking in all of this, because I think we've seen some really good direction. The concept of knife up for mental health, that is beautiful. I think what we've been trying to do that with our mental health initiative, our immigrant mental health initiative, but something that can be more robust. These are really great ideas. If anybody that just spoke, and I'm thinking about La Colmena or NICE, all of you, street vendors, WJP, is there one thing, and not with any kind of explanation, but just say one thing that the city did incredibly well for you during COVID and low-wage workers, and one thing that was just didn't make the mark? And if you can just kind of, if you can do popcorn quick to respond to that, I want to get a sense about where we are doing well as a city and where we are challenged. And if you can, I'd love to kind of hear from you all on that. And Mario, maybe we can start with you. One thing that the city just did A+, and one thing that the city just was too challenged to make it to a thank you.
Well, we worked closely together and with Sarah and her team, on some really quick, efficient, and effective rollout of financial assistance. It's very prosaic. It's not exciting programmatically, and it's very much responsive in the moment. It's, it is what it is, but that was critical. I'm not going to blame anybody on the council or in Moya or anywhere else, but I would say contracting,
Thank you. That is
better.
We need to hear that. We need to hear that.
There's all
and contracting, reimbursement, and building the contracts in the first place, and all of that. Okay,
that's gotta improve.
Yesenia.
Well, La Colmena remained open throughout the entire pandemic. And I was specifically on the ground on the get-go with my staff and the members to ensure that we could build that infrastructure to ensure that La Colmena can remain open. And it was definitely very difficult to do that. And obviously we were definitely afraid of our health, if we would get sick, if we would get our loved ones sick. So that was very traumatizing at a time, but we still kept going. So we were able to see like the pros and cons, and we understand that the pandemic was very unexpected. We understand that the city, the organizations, even businesses, all of us were trying to figure out what are we going to do. So I would like to say that at the beginning, it was very difficult when it came to contracting. And I understand like even now it is very difficult. And I think with small organizations, specifically like La Colmena, we are trying to get funding, but yet if there's like if there's issues with the contracts, if there are issues to getting the money, to getting the contract, it makes our job a lot harder, because at the same time we are trying to serve our community. And it's either or. It's either I focus on this or I focus on my community. Obviously I'm going to be focusing on my community, and then I'm left with the administrative side of it, that I cannot get that money to continue running the organization that provides vital services, right? And that's one. And I understand in the beginning, we were all trying to figure out, trying to get the COVID vaccines to organizations. We were all trying to figure this out. I would like to say that working with Moya, it was great to have contact directly, such as with Nick and Sarah. That's how we were able to get that funding, in the sense to come to La Colmena, because they understood the need of La Colmena. So that was very helpful. We are forever grateful for that. And I know we continue that partnership. And I do hope that whoever comes in or whatnot, that we continue that partnership, because it was very vital to La Colmena. But I would emphasize contracting is very important. Also ensuring on language access is very important, because we're left to doing the translation as well. But we are here to work with the council members and incoming council members in teams to make sure that we can continue providing better services to the immigrant community.
Thank you, Sarah and Nick, for that human touch, and that clearly makes the difference. Thank you, Yesenia. Karina?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit more about this. I would say I wanted to echo Yesenia in shouting out Moya, and specifically Nick, because especially like Nick knows that we only communicate on WhatsApp with our members. So Nick would text us directly critical information that was already translated, so we can just press the forward button and share it out. And that kind of knowledge of understanding how we communicate made it that much simpler and easier for us to ensure that this critical information, vaccine registrations, where vaccines are going to be held, right? Pop-up sites. When there was the shutdown, I forget what it was, but the shutdown where it was nobody could go out to work for a number of days, making sure that information was translated and getting out exactly. That was very important. And then in terms of the difficulties, you know, street vendors being the smallest businesses have had an incredibly difficult time getting any contracting with the city as small business owners. And so we have tried, for example, to apply for funding to hire street vendors to make meals for distribution, noting that vendors would be making culturally sensitive meals, but that was never approved. And also making sure that small business grants are available to street vendors as well, noting that with issues of permitting, right, vendors have a very difficult time showing that they are the owners of their small businesses, which doubly makes it even harder for vendors to apply for grants or loans, even when it's translated, even when it's different forms of applications are available, there's still no way for anyone to prove their ownership. So just ensuring that these types of opportunities that are available to small businesses are also keeping in mind street vendors so that they can be working directly with the city.
Thank you, Karina, for that. And these are really illuminating about what works and what needs to continue. And I want to say thank you for being specific. And Manny?
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Menchaca, for asking this question. I mean, there's a lot, but I have to say, you know, everyone's right. I think that the relationship that we have been working on to you know, work at this level is a long time coming. With particular myself, with Sarah Martin, I think it's important to highlight that because we need to build on top of that, right? And with Nick and with the team, and what I said earlier, we need to protect our institutions, right? And when something's working, you need to like cherish it and like really protect it, right? And I think it's an important point to make because that wasn't the case with other city agencies, right? You all know we work, you know, we've been working to improve the Department of Buildings, for instance, and others, right? And they can learn from Sarah's work, Sarah and Nick's work, for sure. And honestly, as soon as Mario said contracting, I was like, yeah, I changed my mind. That is what needs to be improved.
Noted. Noted.
Frankly, we need to, as a city, think about how to better support the agencies on the ground and not just treat us just like a side project or an afterthought. And so that needs a lot of improvement. Perhaps even its own office, right? That is dedicated just to supporting nonprofit organizations working on the ground. I mean, we are the largest city in the country. I think we deserve it. Thanks.
Thank you, Manny. And it sounds like we have a project for contracting, and I hope that Moya can lend some time and effort for that. And again, kudos to Nick and Sarah for your work. Ligia, if you're still on, if you have anything to add in terms of the best thing that you saw happen during COVID and a challenge.
She's not on anymore.
She's not on. Okay, great. So I think that rounds us out for this panel. Is that right? And Councilmember Drum is also here. I just want to note and thank you for joining us. I know there's a day of voting right now, so and a huge thank you to him for his work as the previous chair of immigration and a massive partner for all things that we did on immigration here in the council together. A beautiful, amazing partner. Back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank this panel for their testimony, and now we'll be moving on to our next public panel. In order, I'll be calling on Callan Lowell, followed by Sarah Lieberstein, followed by Carlin Cohen, followed by Debbie Priya Chatterjee, followed by Merbal Reagan, followed by Tito Sinha, followed by Victoria Roseman. Callan Lowell, you may begin your testimony when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Hi, my name is Callan Lowell, and I'm an Equal Justice Works Fellow in the Employment Practice at Brooklyn Defender Services. BDS provides multidisciplinary and client-centered criminal, family, and immigration defense, as well as civil legal services, social work support, and advocacy in nearly 30,000 cases in Brooklyn every year. I represent immigrant workers on their employment matters, as well as their workplace exploitation-related immigration claims. Thank you so much to Chairman Chaka for the opportunity to testify about the challenges facing immigrant workers during COVID-19. Immigrant workers in New York overwhelmingly lost jobs and hours due to the pandemic, with many who lost work excluded from unemployment insurance due to their immigration status. Those who kept their jobs faced increasingly unsafe and illegal conditions at work. In our written testimony, we offer a number of recommendations on how the city can support low-wage immigrant workers. In my limited time, I'll highlight just a few. First, the council should expand existing just cause firing protections from fast food workers to all low-wage industries to protect immigrant workers from retaliatory firings when they challenge unsafe working conditions. Without expanding these just cause protections to cover all low-wage work, the threat of retaliation has a chilling effect that prevents workers from challenging illegal and unsafe workplace practices. This is especially true for some immigrant workers who would not be eligible for unemployment insurance if they lost their job due to their immigration status. Next, existing fair scheduling protections for fast food and retail workers, enshrined in the Fair Workweek legislation, should be expanded by the Council to cover workers in all low-wage industries. COVID-19 related childcare gaps make reliable and fair scheduling essential for immigrant parents to keep their jobs. Finally, the Council should help eligible workers access immigration relief via increased city agency U and T visa certifications. Just this past month, our unit has worked with numerous undocumented workers whose employers threatened to have them deported when they asserted their workplace rights. While undocumented workers may know this retaliation is against the law, most do not realize that surviving this conduct may make them eligible for workplace-related immigration relief. The Council should implement proactive city agency screening of the workplace safety and discrimination complaints they receive from immigrant workers for workplace exploitation-based U and T visa certification eligibility to help more workers access immigration relief when they are entitled to it. I encourage you to review my written testimony, which includes a full list of recommendations to improve COVID-19 recovery for low-wage workers. Thanks for the opportunity for testify, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Callan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Sarah Lieberstein to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much to Chairman Chaka and to the members of the Immigration Committee for the chance to testify today on this really important subject. My name is Sarah Lieberstein, and I'm an employment attorney with Make the Road New York, a nonprofit community-based membership organization with over 25,000 members dedicated to building the power of immigrant and working class communities to achieve justice and dignity. At Make the Road, we've seen firsthand the extent of the devastation the pandemic has wrought on low-wage and immigrant workers and workers of color. Infections and deaths ravage the communities like the ones where our members live, often in overcrowded multi-generational households with multiple family members working in frontline jobs that put them at really high risk of infection. Even as our members have started to return to work, we see the long-lasting effects of the pandemic in record rates of economic calamity, job loss, and financial insecurity, and a massive housing crisis. The exclusion of many immigrants from critical worker protections, as we've been talking about this morning, has further exacerbated already stark disparities in our city. And even the unprecedented $2.1 billion excluded worker fund, which Make the Road fought really hard with many of our allies here at the hearing today, just couldn't meet the overwhelming demand from workers. Tens of thousands of eligible applicants are waiting and won't get the funds that they need in this round. Make the Road's legal team has also faced unprecedented challenges as helping workers remedy workplace violations. We have dozens of clients whose employers declared bankruptcy, shutting down their businesses, owing weeks, sometimes months worth of wages. A lot of workers who suffered violations before, during the pandemic, were too hesitant to ask for help or to fight back because of their fear of not being called back to work. So they're only calling us now, and we've got backlogs. And of course, enforcement efforts have been stymied by court closings and huge backlogs at New York State Department of Labor and other agencies. So in light of these challenges, we respectfully request that the New York City Council prioritize the following measures. First and foremost, especially for my team, is stabilizing and increasing funding for legal services for workers subject to wage theft and other abuses in the workplace. Given the increased vulnerability of immigrant workers now, the city must increase funding for free legal services, and in particular, the Immigrant Opportunities Initiative, the Low Wage Worker Support Initiative, and the community services block grant funding for legal assistance for low-wage immigrant workers. We also feel really strongly it's so important to maintain funding for the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection and the City Commission on Human Rights, two really critical agencies that simply can't force the city's groundbreaking municipal worker protections unless they have the funding, and they've already suffered a huge reduction in staff and resources. I'll just echo Callan's call to implement legal protections against firing workers for just cause, which we feel is really so critical to protect especially immigrant workers who may not be able to prove that their firing was discriminatory before an agency, but were definitely fired unfairly and really need that. And our economy, frankly, needs that to stabilize workers' lives and also, you know, to be able to support their communities. And lastly, again, you know, city support for workers to access UNT visas, which have been so underused, but are just so critical, is such an important priority for us. We have a lot of other asks, but these are key priorities that will go so far to not only protecting immigrant workers, but really helping our city recover. And we thank you so much for your care and attention to these issues and for immigrant workers around the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, to you and Make the Road.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Carlin Cohen to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry for being out and about, but part of social services has always been being in multiple places at once, even before the pandemic. Thank you so much, Chairman Chaka, for the opportunity to testify. And thank you so much to you and to Lorena and Cesar and your staff for your service to the Asian American community and to immigrant New Yorkers. We are so grateful. This hearing is an incredibly important one because as we begin to talk about recovery in the pandemic, I worry that we are not talking about a recovery for our immigrant New Yorkers. When I testified before this committee this time last year, I reported that 50% of our community members had lost jobs or income during the pandemic, our Asian American, immigrant, and low-income community members. This year, I come to you to say that 70% of our community members have experienced job loss or income loss during the pandemic. And these are the exact workers that we're talking about. It is maybe all too easy or maybe a little too comfortable to say that recovery from this pandemic looks like reopening restaurants and indoor entertainment centers, but that is not a recovery for our immigrant New Yorkers and for our lowest wage workers. And any just recovery and any recovery at all actually has to center our immigrant workers who have been essential throughout this pandemic and will continue to be essential throughout all of New York. This means a lot of the protections that you've already heard about, like just cause employment. This also means investing in workforce development and supports for our immigrant New Yorkers. Our adult literacy classes are a vital lifeline more now than ever. Digital literacy programs, workforce development programs that are geared towards our immigrant community members, and key legal services. Expanding legal services funding during this moment is more critical than ever. But it also means continuing to shore up the supports for our immigrant community members, like housing relief, like connection to public benefits. That's things that keep our immigrant families whole. And when we talk about immigrant workers, we're not just talking about the community members that CPC serves, we're also talking about the staff in social services and community-based organizations that have been serving immigrant New Yorkers throughout this entire pandemic. These are the staff, the contracted human services workers that often qualify for the same benefits that they help enroll community members for, that oftentimes are earning minimum wage themselves. An investment in this workforce is an investment in the immigrant workforce in New York. And so we urge the City Council to pass just pay and raise wages for human services workers across New York City, and to make sure that our contracts are fully funded so we can continue providing critical services for New Yorkers. Lastly, while these are state measures, we would be remiss not to mention that the City Council could be critical in supporting expansion of the Excluded Workers Fund and making that permanent, passing the New York Health Act to ensure that regardless of immigration or employment status, everyone has health insurance, and passing fair pay for home care to raise wages for home care workers. Thank you so much again for your time and for everything you do.
Harlan, thank you so much, and for just bringing it real. And we have been so fortunate to work with you and the CPC team. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Debbie Priya Chatterjee to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Chairman Chaka and the immigration community for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Debbie Priya Chatterjee, and I'm a senior economist with the Community Service Society of New York, a nonprofit organization that works to advance upward mobility for low-income New Yorkers. We have supported low-wage workers, including immigrant workers, for 175 years. Most recently, we worked to pass paid sick laws in statewide and New York City, secured half-price transit fares for New Yorkers in poverty, and made rent relief available through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP. We also advocated alongside our partners, some of whom are here, for the creation of the $2.1 billion Excluded Workers Fund in Albany. Today, my testimony will be focused on the nature and extent of hardship in the low-wage immigrant community and recommendations for policies aimed at alleviating them. I would like to begin by thanking the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Affairs for sharing updates on the important work they do, and to my fellow advocates, without whose invaluable support, it would not have been possible to secure a better New York for our immigrants. We have already heard about how immigrants are a majority of essential workers and have experienced COVID-19 infections and death rates at higher rates than the citywide average. Beyond essential services, a majority of the immigrant workforce is engaged either in low-wage industries or occupations. These are also some of the jobs that were hit the hardest by the pandemic and the recession. Among those surveyed by CSS's 2021 Unheard Third survey, the longest running scientific survey of low-income communities in the nation, and we conduct it annually, 1 in 4 immigrants experienced income losses. As businesses closed and conventional jobs were lost by thousands, many turned to non-traditional work, or what has come to be known as the gig economy. The Unheard Third survey shows that the share of low-income immigrant workforce in gig work increased from 16% in 2020 to 27% this year. Gig workers and independent contractors are often deliberately misclassified by employers to prevent them from accessing critical rights and workplace benefits and protections. For example, minimum pay standard, health and safety protections, paid time off, employer-provided health insurance, and so on. To its credit, the city established the Immigrant Emergency Relief Fund to help workers who were hit the hardest by the pandemic and were ineligible for federal relief or stimulus assistance. The landmark $2.1 billion Excluded Workers Fund, which was designed to offer assistance, is now depleted. It is at this juncture that we urge the City Council to act on the following recommendations, in addition to the brilliant measures that have already been proposed by the rest of the panelists. Pass Intro 2325 and Intro 2241 to ensure that displaced workers are provided with a right to return to their old jobs at their old positions, if to the extent possible. If Intro 2325 would target workers
Time expired.
from restaurant and food service industry, as well as airports, to return to their old jobs. In addition to those two, we would recommend that the council passes Intro 1797, which require DCWP to produce posters for voluntary display at pharmacies and healthcare locations, informing New Yorkers of the right to paid sick leave. And finally, I would recommend a broader actionable recommendation beyond these would be to pass a resolution supporting the expansion of EITC to ITIN filers at the state and city levels. These filers contribute exactly the same to the economy as those with social security numbers, and it is just it's strange that they do not get to avail the tax credits. There are 100,000 of around of those in New York City, in New York State, and I think a measure for an equitable recovery would involve extending the tax credit to them. I'd just like all of you to leave with this note that immigrants contribute 23% of the city's GDP, and so it is high time that we prioritize policies to help low-income immigrant workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah Priya. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Myrble Reagan to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank Chairman Chaka and members of the Committee on Immigration for this opportunity to speak. My name is Marvel Regan. I'm Executive Director of the Women's Center for Education and Career Advancement. We have worked for 51 years to help more than 30,000 New York City working families to achieve economic justice and career opportunities. In our current report, Overlooked and Undercounted 2021, Struggling to Make Ends Meet in New York City, we unveil how precarious the lives of low-wage immigrant workers were before the pandemic, and it indicates just how vulnerable they will continue to be due to the COVID-19 triggered economic crisis. Our research shows that Latinx non-citizen communities are the most significantly affected, with 62% unable to meet their basic needs. That rate is 53% among Black non-citizens and 50% among Asian American Pacific Islander non-citizens. Income inadequacy is substantially lower among white non-citizens at 27%. It's time to employ a policy approach that will best help immigrant working families move beyond the pandemic and toward financial security. In order to facilitate an economic recovery for immigrant families, it's imperative to use a reality-based measure. The self-sufficiency standard is a realistic, geographically specific, and family composition specific measure that offers a clear picture of the exact incomes New York City working families need to make ends meet. Here's an example. In the Bronx, a working father with a 4-year-old son needs to earn $32 an hour and make an income of about $68,000 to meet all expenses according to the standard. According to the poverty measure, that same two-person family only needs to earn $10.40 an hour and make an income of about $17,000. The difference is $51,000. Our new report shows that inadequate wages, not lack of work hours, is the main cause of income inadequacy. The data highlights that workers in New York City will not benefit from returning to jobs that don't pay a family-sustaining wage. The post-pandemic labor market needs improved opportunities across the city. We encourage greater protections for undocumented immigrants who are often exploited, as we've heard, by employers who disregard their right to earn the minimum wage. This protection, coupled with a new foundational safety net that addresses the needs of diverse immigrant communities, is key.
Time expired.
We invite you to look more closely at the self-sufficiency standard, as it documents exactly what New York City working families and your districts need to make ends meet. We also recommend that all pandemic recovery policies be developed using an intersectional racial, gender, and citizenship lens to assist with equitable recovery, because women of color and non-citizens are the demographic groups most heavily impacted by insufficient wages. So we thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to continuing this work with the new City Council. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony today.
Thank you for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Tito Sinha to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Tito Sinha. I'm with the Workers' Rights Practice at Take Root Justice. We represent low-wage workers in claims of wage theft, discrimination, retaliation, sick leave violation, among other workplace injustices. We thank the City Council Committee for this opportunity to submit this testimony on behalf of the citywide Immigrant Legal Empowerment Collaborative. We do so in support of increased, robust, sustainable, and multi-year baseline funding for the Low-Wage Worker Initiative. Much of our work under the Low-Wage Worker Initiative is geared towards recovering money that were lawfully due to immigrant families from their employers in the first place, and which has provided these families and individuals with substantial economic assistance, especially during the pandemic. The Low Wage Worker Initiative is the only dedicated city funding that ensures that the city's low wage and immigrant workers have redress from wage theft, discrimination, retaliation, and other workplace injustices. However, this crucial funding has often lagged behind other priorities requiring last-minute saves from workers' rights advocates, including those within the administration, such as Moya and the City Council, to work to renew the funding. Rather than engaging in this yearly effort to renew this crucial funding, we respectfully call upon the administration and the City Council to demonstrate its ongoing commitment to the city's low wage and immigrant workers by renewing and expanding the baseline low wage workers initiative. Since January 2020 to date, Take Root has obtained approximately $1.3 million in settlements from employers, providing much needed recovery for low wage and immigrant workers who are owed such wages and are entitled to be free of retaliatory and discriminatory practices from the outset. We've been diligently collaborating with community partners and providing Know Your Rights trainings, as well as representing community members in court and before administrative agencies. So failure to renew and expand this funding will have a devastating impact on low wage and immigrant workers, as our recoveries have shown that this is real money going to immigrant families during this time of need. So now more than ever, we ask the administration and the City Council to prioritize this funding, and I thank the Council for its work and its support of low-wage workers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to now welcome Victoria Roseman to testify. You may begin when you are ready.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. Thank you to Committee Council, to Chairman Chaka, and to the New York City Council Committee on Immigration. My name is Victoria Roseman, and I'm a staff attorney with the Unemployed Workers Project at Volunteers of Legal Service, or VOLS. VOLS was established in 1984, and our purpose is to leverage private attorneys to provide free legal services to low-income New Yorkers to help fill the justice gap. The VOLS Unemployed Workers Project hears from dozens of New Yorkers every day asking for help with access to unemployment-related benefits. Many of these claimants lost their jobs in the wake of the pandemic and successfully applied for unemployment insurance benefits, providing them with a lifeline. Now, the New York City immigrant working population is one of the most vulnerable and heavily impacted by the pandemic and subsequent citywide shutdown. Though many workers were able to utilize unemployment insurance benefits during this uncertain time, non-citizen workers faced a variety of difficulties in obtaining the benefits. Now, the unemployment insurance system pre-pandemic was not built to assist non-citizen workers. State benefits have stringent requirements in order to qualify. Applicants must provide the Department of Labor with W-2 working papers, months of demonstrable work history, must reach earning thresholds, and perhaps the most daunting, the Department of Labor will call the applicant's employer, who must verify all of that information. Without this documentation or acquiescence, applicants can't collect benefits. Now, federal benefits facilitated access for many claimants who couldn't previously collect, including independent contractors or self-employed individuals. However, complex reporting requirements still made this process difficult for non-citizen claimants. Applicants must provide proof of wages and, significantly, employment authorization documents, or EADs. So while federal benefits open the door for some immigrant workers, thanks to the help of community-based organizations and legal services, hundreds of thousands of vital, undocumented New York City workers were unable to collect the life-changing family-supporting assistance. Then, of course, there is the occasional situation that I'd like to raise in which a non-citizen worker was able to collect benefits despite having this gap in their work authorization. There are a few reasons why this may have happened: a lack of careful review from the Department of Labor, a misstatement or misunderstanding stemming from the confusing language in that application, or perhaps a misunderstanding of non-citizen claimants' own work situation as furloughs, reopenings, and temporary layoffs plague businesses. To further exacerbate that confusion, non-English speaking claimants must overcome language access issues. Many important instructions and documents are not translated, and the documents that are translated are limited to just a few languages. So it's difficult for non-English speaking claimants to receive translation services over the phone. Non-citizen workers and To be fair, workers in general were often encouraged to apply for these benefits by their peers, their neighbors, their families. Non-citizen workers may have been paid benefits briefly, only for those benefits to be clawed back by the Department of Labor later by confusing and aggressive
Time
overpayment
expired.
notices. These overpayments can be in the thousands of dollars, some as much as $20,000 now owed to the Department of Labor. The long and short here is that there's a complete lack of ongoing state or federal assistance for low-wage non-citizen workers, despite the fact that immigrant workers make up such a large part of the working population. As the city moves towards post-pandemic planning, the reopening of non-essential stores, resuming of activities, and New York City traditions, it is easy to forget what those essential workers meant for a population on lockdown. Immigrant workers, including undocumented workers, were those who continued to leave the house when things were most uncertain and continued to serve communities despite the clear danger. We're asking for better systems in place, a better unemployment system, less stringent requirements, a myriad of improvements that some of these other people have already touched on, to help these workers return to normal in a way that so many of us are trying our best to do. Most importantly, it's imperative to support legal service organizations to help this population obtain benefits, especially public benefits like unemployment insurance. Organizations like VOLS help those who are eligible to meaningfully move through these confusing systems and to represent those who need help in legal settings, including hearings. Without legal services support, this population will be unable to thrive post-pandemic whenever we may get there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you so much for your testimony. That concludes this panel and actually concludes our public testimony for today. If we have inadvertently missed anyone that has registered to testify today and has yet to be called, you can please use the Zoom raise hand function now, and you will be called on in the order in which you've raised your hands. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it to Chairman Chaka for any questions or comments.
I just want to say thank you to the panel for, I think you really went in deep with ideas to make the system better and have really identified gaps that are going to be really important for the next council. And so I want to say thank you for that. We are at the end of this last committee hearing, and these last eight years now have been an incredible honor to serve as the chair. I came in with some incredible team members, and I just want to say their name because they have really embedded themselves in the history of this committee. That include Catalina Cruz, who you may know her now as Assembly member in Queens, was the committee counsel on this committee. Indiana Porta, also counsel to this committee, and Harbani Aouja. We also have Muzna Ansari, a policy analyst, Elizabeth Kronk, who is also a policy analyst, including Jennifer Montalvo, another policy analyst. Stella Chan, who represented the outreach team here in the City Council and has brought in an incredible amount of understanding on the ground through her work here in the City Council. In the Finance Committee, and they have been really embedded in how we think about this on the policy side, transforming that into budget stuff, Krillian Francisco and Florentine and Jin Lee. They have been a big part of the history of this council. And I want to just thank my team. Lorena Lucero, my chief of staff, Cesar Vargas, deputy chief of staff, Tony Chirito, who was communications on this, who you may have met along the way. There's no way that I could do and be here present with all of you to think through all these things without all of them. I want to say thank you to those individuals that have served the city with incredible power and passion and commitment to our most vulnerable community, most dynamic community in New York City. Now, as I end, I want to ensure that I give a kind of last thought. What I've learned in this committee is that when we focus on the most vulnerable people in our city, what we're doing is lifting that safety net up higher. It is not always easy to focus on the most vulnerable because sometimes they're a smaller population that feel invisible, that are misunderstood, that are scapegoated. And government tends to do most for the many. but it is the power of this committee that we have lifted up the voices. Many times they have spoken themselves about the things that we have just not been doing, and beautiful things happen. The immigrant community is the engine of our economy here. They're the engine of civic engagement. I had the pleasure of leading my district, District 38, where over 50% of the people who live in my district are foreign born. They speak a different language at home. They are from China, Latin America, they are from Africa, they are from parts of the Middle East. They are part of our community. And when participatory budgeting became such a central part of my work in the district, they came out and they spoke their truth to power. They voted and have really been part of this longer conversation about a bill that we just passed last week that are granting legally permanent residents, green card holders, dreamers, TPS, and DACA recipients the power to vote. That is the power of this committee and what work we've been doing. And so when I hear ideas about how we can solve those gaps, I'm committed. You have seen Moya dedicated, and I'm so happy that the humanity that's come out of this incredible agency was at the top of people's list about what made this city so important in responding to this COVID crisis. And when we think about workers, the street vendors, we protested and got arrested for not just street vendors, but taxi drivers. And I'm thinking about the airport workers. There's so many immigrants that are embedded in all of these workers that have fought for justice, and we're right there with them. We are not out of the woods yet on COVID, and so I hope that many of these ideas, and I'll make sure that that happens, get codified and ensured that they land on the desks of the city council members and all the city agencies as we move forward. And I hope to partner with Moya in the future to ensure that that happens. I want to leave you with this. My time in the council really reminded me of my time as a child, growing up in a mixed status family, ensuring that my mom got all the information by translating for her. I see myself and my family and the families that come to and before this committee. And so I'm connected with you, and as you are connected with us. And so let us continue this vision of a better sanctuary city as we struggle towards sanctuary. And I want to say thank you again for your service, all of you. And with that, we will now adjourn this meeting.